Prep. Welcome to another session on internal security. So, yesterday we were about to complete the chapter on terrorism. We had just few topics left under terrorism. Let's wrap it up. We'll look at some previous questions as well. And after that, we'll be starting with the next chapter, which is on Northeast insurgency. So, if you guys remember, yesterday we were covering India's counter terror architecture and the legal framework we have against terrorism. We discussed about NIA, we spoke about NatGrid, and we also discussed the laws that we have, including the UAPA. At the end, we were talking about the NCTC. This is what we were discussing when we ended the session yesterday. So let's start from here. Let's cover the last 2-3 topics that are there, and then we'll take up the previous questions. The NCTC, or the National Counter-Terrorism Center, it was a proposal that was made in India after the Mumbai attacks. This proposal was brought up by the then Manmohan Singh government to improve intelligence gathering and to improve coordination between intelligence agencies. This idea of NCTC was modeled on the NCTC of the United States. I was telling you yesterday that the US learned a very important lesson during the 9/11 attacks, that due to lack of coordination and sharing of intelligence between different agencies, the attack slipped through. FBI, CIA, they all had different pieces of information which they did not piece together, which they did not bring together due to the lack of sharing of intelligence. This is how usually it works in the world of intelligence. Because intelligence agencies, counter-terror agencies, they're very secretive about how they operate. They don't share information easily with other government organs because there is a risk of compromising their sources, their methods of operation. So they very secretly guard their information, and this sometimes could lead to some intelligence input slipping through the network. So the US, which had established the 9/11 Inquiry Commission to look at the lapses in intelligence, identified several gaps in intelligence sharing. It clearly pointed out that had FBI and CIA shared some pieces of information, the US might have seen the bigger picture and potentially they could have stopped the 9/11 attacks. So following this, the US established the NCTC as an intelligence sharing platform. It was established as an intelligence sharing platform. Is that clear? So all the American intelligence agencies, they come together at this platform. It does not compromise the powers of any intelligence agency, right? It does not step on anyone's jurisdiction. It simply creates a common platform where they can come together and share valuable information with each other. Understood? So on similar lines, India proposed a model for NCTC, but the Indian model that was proposed was slightly different. In the case of India as well, during the Mumbai attacks, IB and RAW, they had some valuable pieces of intelligence with them, but the failure to share that with each other allowed the attack to happen, right? Again, see, don't assume that the attack could have been stopped just because of sharing of intelligence. That is one of the factors that could have played a role. Because intelligence agencies, they receive thousands of inputs every single day, right? It's all about carrying out analysis and assessments, sharing that information. So they do prevent many attacks, but some of them slip through, right? So in the case of 26/11 attacks, there was a possibility where IB and DRAW and NTRO, if they had shared all the intelligence they had with each other better, they could have potentially prevented the attack. So following these commissions and inquiries that happened after the Mumbai attacks, India also proposed a similar model, a similar platform called NCTC. But in the case of India, it would not just be an intelligence sharing platform. It would not just be an intelligence sharing platform, but it would have executive powers of its own. This is where the Indian model of NCTC differed from the American model. See, in the US, NCTC was easily established. No one objected to it because it was not stepping on the jurisdiction of any of the agencies. It was not affecting the jurisdiction of FBI or CIA. It didn't have any specific empowerment or any specific law enforcement powers of its own, right? NCTC in the US is not another agency or organization. It's simply a platform where they come together and share intelligence. So as a result, in the US, it was a very smooth process. All the agencies agreed to create the NCTC. But in India, the model proposed by the government was not just an intelligence sharing platform, but rather it would be a separate organization of its own. Just like NIA, it would be a separate organization of its own with its own executive powers to conduct arrest, to carry out investigations, and to even conduct its own counter-terror operations. Is that clear? So essentially, it would become another counter-terror agency, paralleling the NIA and the intelligence agencies of India. And moreover, this would not be set up through law. It wouldn't be set up through a parliamentary law. It was proposed to be set up through a government resolution. So as a result, serious concerns came up about the NCTC model. Very strong opposition came up against it. It was opposed by several state governments. It was opposed by several political parties. It was also opposed by several central intelligence and law enforcement agencies. Is that clear? IB and RAW and NIA, they strongly opposed the formation of NCTC because that would harm their jurisdiction. If there is another parallel organization being created, right, it's simply an overlap of the roles, which could also lead to wastage of resources as well. So at the central level, the intelligence and law enforcement agencies, they strongly opposed the creation of NCTC on these lines. It would not just be an intelligence sharing platform, it would be an organization of its own with executive powers to arrest, investigate, and conduct its own counter-terror operations. Then what's the point of having NIA, IB, RAW, and the others, right? So central agencies, they strongly opposed it within the national government, within the central government. State governments and political parties also opposed it because they feared that such an organization could be misused by the ruling parties at the center. Since it would not have any legal backing, right? It would be set up through a government resolution. It would be accountable only to the government, to the ruling party. It would not be answerable to the parliament, and it was seen as a threat to the federal structure of the country. Its powers would overlap with the state police. And opposition parties, especially regional parties, they feared that ruling party at the center could use NCTC to target the political opponents and the critics, right? So as a result, there was very strong opposition against NCTC, and the proposal was eventually dropped. The proposal has been dropped and NCTC has not been formed. It's not been established in India. Understood? But instead, a platform has been created for intelligence sharing. It's called the Multi-Agency Center, or MAC, which functions within the IB. Under Intelligence Bureau, a platform has been created for intelligence sharing, where all the other intelligence agencies like RAW, NTRO, then even the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, Narcotics Control Bureau, and the others, they will all come together to share information related to counter-terrorism. Only counter-terror related intelligence will be shared, and the platform also helps in planning joint operations against terrorist activities. Is that clear? So NCTC proposal was shot down. It was strongly opposed by state governments, political parties, and by the central agencies as well. It was stepping on their jurisdiction. It was leading to overlap. Regional parties and political opponents were worried that it could be misused by the government as it will not have legal accountability. Clear? There was a fear that it could be used to target political opposition. So because of the strong criticism, the proposal was dropped, and instead a multi-agency center functions under the IB where all intelligence agencies share information related to counterterrorism. So this is the institutional architecture that we have in India to counter terrorism. We have a dedicated law enforcement agency, that is the NIA. We have an integrated database, which is NatGrid, to track suspects. We have a legal framework under UAPA, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. And we have intelligence agencies such as IB and DRAW, which have their own counterterrorism divisions. So this is the counter-terror architecture of India. Is that clear? A mains question can be asked on this topic. Given the threat India faces from terrorism, right? A direct question can be asked on the role of intelligence agencies, law enforcement agencies, or what is the architecture we have, what are the institutions we have to deal with terrorism. Understood? So now, let's talk about the global efforts that India has taken to counter terrorism. At the United Nations and also through bilateral relations, what efforts have we taken to counter terrorism at the global level? At the United Nations, India has proposed a convention, the CCIT Convention. Please make a note of this. It's very, very important for your prelims. Because it's an old topic, it's not too important for your mains, but very important for your prelims. There can be a question here. CCIT stands for Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. This convention was proposed by India in 1996 to deal with all forms of terrorism without distinguishing between so-called good terrorism and bad terrorism. It would cover all forms of terrorism, especially state-sponsored terrorism. India wanted a universal definition of terrorism to be accepted and a common approach to be adopted by every country through this convention, so that we could effectively tackle all forms of terrorism without distinguishing between terror groups. Because some countries, they have the habit of distinguishing terror groups as good terror outfits and bad terror outfits, or good terrorism and bad terrorism. Now, how can this be possible? It is possible because there are certain countries which benefit from few terror activities. There are governments which use terrorism as a geopolitical weapon to protect their national interests. Like Pakistan, for example, the United States, Israel, many European countries, several West Asian powers like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Russia and China, Turkey, all these major global powers, they work with some or the other terrorist outfit to protect their interests. So they don't act against them. They consider them to be the so-called good terrorists. Why? Because they're serving their interests. Pakistan uses terror groups to target India. Right? Pakistan does not act against Lashkar-e-Toiba. It does not act against Jaish-e-Mohammed. In the eyes of Pakistan, these terror groups are good terror groups. They're serving Pakistani interests. So, in the last many decades, be it US, be it some European countries, West Asian powers, even Russia, China, Israel, Turkey, and some other countries, they have sponsored radical extremist terror organizations. They've worked closely with them and used them as proxies to serve their geopolitical interests. So they don't act against them. This is a case of state-sponsored terrorism. And that is exactly what India wanted to act against. Since we were the biggest victims of state-sponsored terrorism, we wanted the world to stop distinguishing between so-called good terrorists and bad terrorists. These countries, they are hypocritical. They act against only those terror groups which are a threat to them. See, we studied in the previous classes that Pakistan sees TTP as a threat, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Pakistan targets only Pakistan Taliban. It doesn't target other terror groups. Similarly, West Asian powers, US, Russia, China, they all selectively act against few terror groups which are a threat to them. China acts against a terror group called ETIM, but it does not act against Pakistan-sponsored terror groups which are targeting India. right? So many countries, they do this. They distinguish between terror groups. Those groups which are their proxies, which are serving their interests, they don't act against them. Whereas they target only those groups which are a threat to them. This hypocritical approach of few countries which are involved in sponsoring terrorism is affecting our fight against global terrorism. That's the reason why India wanted a universal definition and a common approach through a UN convention, and we proposed this idea in 1996. But unfortunately, it hasn't got enough support. Obviously, you can understand why. If the convention is adopted, then all countries will have to adopt common measures and target all forms of terror groups. That's exactly what other countries don't want. They want to continue using terrorism as a weapon, as a geopolitical tool. So many countries have opposed it. And due to lack of support, this convention has not been adopted. So then how is it relevant? It is relevant for the exam because even now, India keeps pushing for it. Every time we attend the UN General Assembly Summit that happens in September, and during any discussion on terrorism, right, we bring up this issue. We point out that we have a convention proposed in 1996, and we ask countries to act on it. We remind the countries to adopt this convention. Is that clear? So that is why a basic question can come on this topic. So under the convention, India has proposed a universal definition which should be accepted by all the member states, and accordingly, they will incorporate the provisions into their concerned national laws. Every country will have its own counter-terror laws. These provisions of the UN Convention will have to be adopted into the national legal framework. It seeks to criminalize all forms of international terrorism, and it mandates the UN members to deny access to funds, access to safe havens or terror sanctuaries, and also access to arms and weapons. If the convention is adopted, every UN member will be obligated to deny terrorists a safe haven on their soil. They can't host terror sanctuaries in their country. They cannot tolerate terror financing. They need to act against terror financing. They need to block any routes through which terrorists are raising weapons and arms for their operations. Is that clear? It bans all terror groups and calls for a shutdown of terror camps around the world. It calls for very stringent provisions, very strict legal provisions to prosecute terrorists under special laws, and also provides for extradition with regard to terrorist activities. These are the provisions that India has suggested under CCIT convention. So many countries are opposed to it. They have their own reasons for that. For example, US, then Pakistan, several West Asian powers, even Russia and China, all these global powers which do work with terror groups, they obviously don't want this convention to be adopted. Right? If the convention is adopted, it will harm their interests. They could be held accountable for sponsoring terrorism. So all these countries are opposing because they don't want to give up the option of using terrorism as a proxy weapon. There are others who are concerned about human rights violations if the convention is adopted, especially Latin American countries. They have a concern that if this convention proposed by India is adopted, it could lead to human rights violations because of the stringent provisions that India is recommending. There are some very strict provisions which is similar to our UAPA and other laws like TADA and POTA. We studied yesterday what problems we have in our legal framework, right? The broad provisions, the discretion given to the police and law enforcement. This would always be misused to target innocents, to commit torture, to violate fundamental rights and constitutional rights. Now, if such a convention is adopted with very stringent provisions, authoritarian governments, dictatorial governments might use this convention as an excuse to adopt extremely strict laws and target their critics and political opponents in the name of fighting terrorism. They can easily bring up false charges against their critics and political dissidents and get them arrested and deliver strict punishments to them, thereby curbing basic rights. So Latin American countries are worried about the stringent provisions, so they have also opposed it because they fear possible human right violations. Then you have two countries of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Some of these countries, they support the Palestinian cause. While support for Palestine is not the problem, support for terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah is a problem. Some of these countries, they look at Hamas and Hezbollah as liberation movements, as revolutionary national liberation movements, right? But as you have seen just few days ago, Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization. So is Hezbollah, right? They might be fighting for the Palestinian cause, but that does not justify the brutal, violent methods they use, which is a gross violation of human rights. Any human being with common sense will oppose Hamas and Hezbollah, no matter what cause they are fighting for. See, almost every country supports the Palestinian cause, including India. Even we support Palestine to have its own country. We support the Palestinians. We support the two-state solution. US also supports two-state solution. But does not mean you can use terrorism to achieve that. Some of these OIC members, they look at Hamas and Hezbollah as liberation movements, as revolutionary movements, and they want them to be exempted. So this cannot be accepted. And because of all these oppositions, the convention has not been adopted at the UN. Is that clear? So there can be a basic prelims question, right? Even in the mains answer, let's say you want to talk about our global efforts, you can mention the CCIT convention in the answer. Is that clear? Let's say there is an essay topic on global terrorism. So there definitely you have to talk about this. You can suggest that there is a need for such a global framework where we need a universal definition to counter terrorism and we need a common approach amongst all countries. We need cooperation amongst all countries to counter terrorism. You can take the example of Canada. Look at how Canada is distinguishing with Khalistani outfits and not cooperating with India, right? So give such examples from current affairs and justify your argument, and you can call for a global convention like the one India has proposed. Is that clear? So this is one major initiative of India. The other major initiative is how India has used a platform called the 1267 Sanctions Committee of the UN Security Council to designate terrorists as global terrorists. This is another important topic. The UNSC 1267 Sanctions Committee. UNSC 1267 Sanctions Committee. This committee was established under the UN Security Council back in 1999 through resolution number 1267. That's why it's called 1267 Sanctions Committee. All right, it was established through a resolution that was pushed by the members of UNSC, and the resolution number was 1267. This Sanctions Committee was established primarily to target the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda. That's why it is also popularly referred to as Taliban Sanctions Committee or Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee. But after 2014, after the rise of Islamic State or ISIS, few more provisions have been added to cover ISIS terrorists as well. So it's also referred to as the ISIS or ISIL or the Daesh Sanctions Committee. ISIS stands for Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. It's also called ISIL, Islamic State in the Levant region where Iraq and Syria are located. The Arabic name of ISIS is Daesh. So to target ISIS terrorists, changes were made, and today it's even referred to as the Daesh or the ISIL Sanctions Committee. Previously it was called Taliban or Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee. Those are the informal names. So it was established in 1999 to designate individual terrorists, especially terror leaders and the top terrorists, to designate them as global terrorists and to proscribe them. Is that clear? So any UN member can propose a name. Any UN member can make a proposal which has to be supported by the UNSC. Let's say a country like India. Let's say we want to target a particular terrorist who is a major threat for us. So we need to build evidence against him. The UN member has to build evidence, create a detailed document, and gain the support of UNSC members, the 15 members of UNSC, and bring a resolution to designate this individual terrorist as a global terrorist. This decision will be made by all the 15 members through consensus. I hope you know who are the 15 members of UNSC. You have the P5, the 5 permanent members, US, UK, France, Russia, and China. They are the ones who have the veto power. And there are 10 non-permanent members who are elected on a rotational basis for 2-year terms. So in total, you have 15 members in UNSC. So here decision making is through consensus. It's not just P5 countries which have the veto. Every member has a veto in a way. All the 15 countries have to agree and support the resolution, and only then the individual terrorist will be designated as a global terrorist. And once designated, once a global terrorist is designated by the sanctions committee, 3 types of sanctions will apply against the terrorist. All the UN members have to implement these 3 sanctions. It's mandatory. They have to freeze all the financial assets. Basically, it will lead to economic sanctions against that terrorist. Every UN member, they need to freeze any known financial assets of that individual. It could be bank accounts, property and assets, and maybe other stock investments, any kind of financial asset belonging to the terrorist or related to the terrorist, which is owned by other individuals or organizations. Any such known financial asset which is flagged by the proposing country should be frozen in order to impose economic sanctions. The idea is to cut terror financing. The idea is to limit the terrorists from accessing funds which will help them in planning and executing their terror operations. Is that clear? It leads to economic sanctions. Next, every UN member is obligated to restrict the movement of the terrorist. And if they detect the presence of the terrorist, they need to arrest that particular individual. Because terrorists, they move from country to country, right? When they run their organizations, when they're planning attacks, executing attacks, the terrorists, they move from across borders. So every country will be obligated to restrict their movement. If they detect their presence, they need to arrest them and inform the proposing country. The third sanction, they have to block access to weapons. Block access to weapons. They should ensure that the concerned terrorists will not procure weapons through their country. Is that clear? These are the 3 sanctions which will apply on globally designated terrorists under the 1267 Sanctions Committee. Now, India has relied on this platform quite heavily, and we have targeted many major terrorists from Pakistan, such as Hafiz Saeed, the mastermind of the Mumbai attacks, the founder of Jamaat-ud-Dawa and Lashkar-e-Toiba. Jamaat-ud-Dawa is a front organization for the Lashkar. Lashkar is purely a terrorist outfit, a jihadist outfit, whereas Jamaat-ud-Dawa acts like a social organization, like an NGO. But it's only a cover, it's only a front. Jamaat-ud-Dawa acts as a front for LET, for recruitment, for raising funds, etc. So Hafiz Saeed was designated after the Mumbai attacks. Then Masood Azhar, the founder of Jaish-e-Mohammed. India has targeted him since many, many years. But every time, China was blocking the proposal. Since 2009 till 2019, for an entire decade, India made multiple attempts to designate Masood Azhar, but each time China would block it to protect Pakistan. right? Because this would clearly show that Pakistan is hosting all these terrorists. It allowed Hafiz Saeed to be designated because there was tremendous global pressure after the Mumbai attacks. But in the case of Masood Azhar, China kept blocking India's proposal. It would always cite lack of evidence from India. It would raise these technical issues unnecessarily, and it would always say that enough evidence is not being provided by India. By using this excuse, it would block India's proposal, and since the decisions are taken by consensus, the proposal would fail. Even 14 countries were supporting India out of 15. Only China would be the one blocking. And as a result, the proposals were failing again and again. But after Pulwama attacks, and after India carried out Balkot airstrikes and tensions increased, it appeared that India and Pakistan were going to war. The tensions were very high. So then the P5 members, the other P5 members, they put a lot of pressure on China to remove the bloc. And finally, Masood Azhar was also designated as a global terrorist. Is that clear? It was US, France, UK and Russia which helped India. They wanted to calm India down. They wanted to prevent a potential conflict. Because after the Balkot airstrikes, Pakistan also had retaliated, leading to severe escalation in tensions. So to ensure that things calm down, the P5 members, they moved very quickly and put a lot of pressure on China to give up its unnecessary blocking. Finally, China also conceded after Pulwama attacks, and Masood Azhar was designated as a global terrorist. Right now, we are pursuing many more names. There are at least 5 other terrorists we are pursuing. They're all from Pakistan, right? Some of them were recently designated, but still China is blocking a few. China is still blocking a few terrorists from being designated. All right, so this is a developing story. It's a current affairs topic. So that's why I insist that this topic is important. You will keep reading about this in your newspapers. In the last 2 years, we are trying to designate few more terrorists from Pakistan. And we have been successful only with few, with a couple of them. But there are 3-4 other names which China is holding on to. It's blocking their designation. Again, on same grounds. It's just trying to shield Pakistan. It's giving diplomatic support to Pakistan. So India's efforts will continue, right? You will see that in the coming months, India might succeed in designating these individuals. So it will keep coming in newspapers, and hence the topic becomes important for your prelims. So please know, what is the sanctions committee? How has India used it? What kind of sanctions will apply? And how does it take decisions? These basic details are very important for your exam. Is that clear? So now we come to the last topic in this chapter. I want you guys to have a better understanding of global terrorism, given the threat the world faces from terrorist organizations. UPSC exam is such a dynamic exam that you can't just stick to some topics that are relevant for India, right? Global terrorism is relevant for India. Terrorism in any corner of the world will affect India as well. There could be a terror group in Africa, right, which might have ties with a Pakistani terror outfit, right? So you need to have this broad general awareness about some global terror organizations as well. Of course, not in detail, at least the basics. You should be familiar with the name. You should know which country they operate in. You should know whom they target, right? At least some basic 3-4 points about each terrorist organization. All right. So let's take a look at this. And after that, we can take up the previous questions. So let's make it a little interactive, right? Let me not just give out the points. Let's make it a little interactive. Let's start with ARSA. ARSA stands for the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. So can you tell me which country it operates in? I have already given you a clue. Very good. It operates in Myanmar, primarily in the Rakhine state. It's a Myanmar-based terrorist outfit, the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. The victims of Rohingya violence, right? Because Rohingya minorities, They have been targeted by radical Buddhists and Myanmar's army in Myanmar. They have committed brutal atrocities against them. They've almost committed a genocide. So some of the victims of this violence, they have taken up radicalism and extremism to counter the radical Buddhists and the Myanmar army. So this outfit is called ARSA. It has very close connections with Lashkar-e-Toiba and Al-Qaeda, and even with Pakistan's ISI. This group, can it be a threat to India? Yes or no? Can ARSA be a threat to India? Very good. 100% yes. There are many reasons why ARSA could target India as well. First of all, it's operating in our own neighborhood, right next to our borders. Correct? It might have connections with other insurgent and terrorist groups that are already targeting India. Along with that, India is the birthplace of Buddhism, where you have many important Buddhist pilgrimage sites. Since ARSA targets Buddhist sites, it might attempt an attack on India, on the pilgrimage sites in India. In fact, it has already tried once. At Bodh Gaya in Bihar, there was a failed terror attempt which was linked with ARSA. The attack was a failure. It didn't go on as planned, fortunately. But an attempt was definitely made, and Indian intelligence agencies linked this failed attack with ARSA. Plus, India is a very close friend of Myanmar's army. We have never criticized the army, the junta, for the atrocities they have committed against Rohingyas. Instead, we have given funds and weapons to them, right? So that could also be a reason why ARSA could target India. And along with that, India has taken a hostile approach to the refugees. The current government has been unwelcoming of the refugees, and it has taken a hostile approach against Rohingya refugees. So all these reasons could lead ARSA to potentially see India as a target. So India works with Myanmar to contain the threat, and we believe that the group has links with Lashkar, Al-Qaeda, and even Pakistan's ISI. Next, the Afghan Taliban. Of course, you know where it operates. It operates in Afghanistan. Technically speaking, if you look at it academically, Taliban is a radical insurgent political outfit. Is that clear? But the kind of violence it has carried out and the way in which it has Taliban as a terrorist organization. But today, the Taliban has captured power again in Afghanistan. It has formed the government in Afghanistan. So it's no longer just a terrorist organization. It is in power. It has formed an interim government. In 2021, it threw out the Afghan civilian government and it has captured power in the country. So in the past, when the Taliban was very, very close to Pakistan's ISI, it was known to shelter several terrorist organizations. It has given shelter to Al-Qaeda. It has given shelter to anti-India terror groups such as Lashkar, Jaish, Hizbul Mujahideen, even Indian Mujahideen, and some Khalistan groups as well. So Afghan Taliban has tolerated the presence of anti-India terror groups, given support to these outfits at the behest of Pakistan's ISI in the past. So Taliban remains a concern for India, but however, things have changed right now. Right now, India itself is talking to Taliban. We have reopened our embassy in Kabul and we have established a dialogue with Taliban to see if we can protect India-Afghanistan relations, because we have major interests in Afghanistan. We have made very big investments in the country, right? And we have serious security threats from the region. So the reality is that the government, so India is forced to work with it, and we are trying to engage with the Taliban. Recently, talks have been opened between the government of India and the Taliban government. Understood? Next, a related group called Haqqani Network. The Haqqani Network is a notorious terrorist organization that operates along the Af-Pak border, along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. It is one of the factions one of the branches of the Afghan Taliban. Is that clear? It is one of the factions of the Afghan Taliban, and it operates primarily along the Af-Pak border. Now, what do you think? Is Haqqani network a direct threat to India or not? Yes or no? Is the Haqqani network a direct threat? Some are saying no, but most are saying yes. Good. Haqqani network is definitely a threat for India. It has been a major threat. It has carried out many attacks against Indian interests in the past. Indian interests in Afghanistan have been repeatedly attacked by this outfit, as it acts on behalf of Pakistan's ISI. Haqqani network is very close to the ISI. The ISI has protected and nurtured this group. And the ISI had used Haqqani network to target Indian influence in Afghanistan. Our embassy in Kabul, our consulates in Afghanistan, they were repeatedly attacked by Haqqani network. It is directly responsible for the killing of several Indian diplomats, Indian intelligence officers who were deployed in Afghanistan. It has targeted Indian projects and Indian workers. So Haqqani network is definitely a major threat for India. Right now, it is headed by Sirajuddin Haqqani. Its leader is Sirajuddin Haqqani, and he is a globally designated terrorist. He has been designated by the 1267 Sanctions Committee. Is that clear? But the worst part for India is that we have to be friendly to Sirajuddin Haqqani. We have to talk to him. Why? Because right now, he is the interior minister of the Taliban government. After Taliban captured power, Sirajuddin Haqqani has become the home minister, the interior minister. So India is forced to deal with him, right? He's a designated terrorist. His outfit is directly responsible for the death of Indian citizens and Indian officials. And yet, we have to deal with him because that is how geopolitics works. So Haqqani network remains a threat for India. Next, the Al-Qaeda and the various branches of Al-Qaeda. As we have discussed in previous sessions, the Al-Qaeda was primarily based out of Afghanistan. The main branch of Al-Qaeda was based out of Afghanistan, and it was founded by Osama bin Laden. The Al-Qaeda rose to prominence in the late 80s, and by 1990s, it became a major threat for Western countries. It was sheltered by the Taliban government in Afghanistan. When Taliban had formed the government previously in 1996, it had given a shelter to Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, and terrorists from around the world were accumulating in Afghanistan to work for this terrorist outfit. Founded by Osama bin Laden in the 1980s, it started scaling up its terror attacks through the 1990s. It has carried out many major attacks against US and European countries, not only in their own country and their own soil, but in other countries as well. It has repeatedly targeted American interests and European interests. Is that clear? The 9/11 attacks, for example. Then many attacks in Europe, many attacks in Africa, in West Asia, targeting Western interests. All these attacks have been executed by Al-Qaeda. At one point, this was the most notorious terrorist organization, and it was the most well-funded organization. As it had a global appeal, its ideology had a global appeal, right? Osama bin Laden had given a call to target all the so-called non-believers, the kafirs or the infidels. He had given a call that Al-Qaeda will wage a war against Western countries. So this became very attractive for radical extremists around the world, and they all supported the group. Around the world, extremists were backing this group, sending donations and funds, and many of them would travel to Afghanistan to fight for Al-Qaeda. Is that clear? At one point, it was the most prominent global terrorist organization. The 9/11 attacks was the biggest attack carried out by Al-Qaeda, following which the US declared a war against terrorism, especially against Al-Qaeda, and to eliminate Osama bin Laden. So this group has a few branches. There are different branches that have come up, such as AQAP and AQIM. The AQAP is the branch of Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. If the main branch is in Afghanistan, the AQAP branch is in the Arabian Peninsula. That's in the Gulf, in the West Asia region. In Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and across the Gulf region, AQAP has a presence, especially in Yemen. Then AQIM stands for Islamic Maghreb, which is in North Africa. In the Saharan region and Sahel region of Northern Africa, there are many countries where radicalism and terrorism has become a major threat. You have countries like Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and many others. In the Saharan and the Sahel region in Northern Africa, there are many countries where Al Qaeda has a big presence. Right? It's called AQIM, Al Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. Similarly, Al Qaeda has branches focused on East Africa and also on South Asia, which covers India. Al Qaeda has a separate branch that focuses on South Asia that covers India. So definitely Al Qaeda remains a threat. It has connections with various anti-India terror groups. It's very close to Jaish-e-Mohammed. It's very close to Lashkar-e-Toiba, Hizbul Mujahideen, even Indian Mujahideen. Pakistan is the one which has created all these connections. So Al Qaeda remains a threat, even though group has been weakened. Right? The top leaders have been eliminated. Osama bin Laden was killed by US. Right? Then other leaders like Ayman al-Zawahiri, the second in command, even he was recently assassinated in a drone strike in Afghanistan. Even though most top leaders have been eliminated, the group remains quite formidable in Afghanistan and around the world, and it poses a threat for India and the rest of the countries. Next, the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. It is the Pakistan branch of Taliban. Just like you have Afghan Taliban, there is a Pakistan Taliban as well. These are related organizations, like brother organizations. The goal of TTP is just like Afghan Taliban, to throw the Pakistani government out and capture power to form a so-called Islamic state and enforce the rigid Sharia law. Is that clear? So TTP has been targeting the Pakistani state itself. In a way, Pakistan is paying the price for breeding terrorism for all these years. Today, the TTP has become a very dangerous organization with the ability to carry out major attacks. It has a lot of support from other terror groups as well. And there is a credible security threat for the survival of Pakistan by this group. Is that clear? Today, Pakistan is facing a very grave crisis in the last 2 years especially. The TTP has scaled up its attacks. It wants to throw out the Pakistani government, the ISI and the army, and capture power in Pakistan to form Pakistan as an Islamic country, right? To make it a radical extremist nation. So TTP does pose a very serious threat to the stability of Pakistan, and it's a very serious concern for everyone, including India. In the past, Pakistan has blamed India and Afghanistan for sponsoring TTP. When we had a friendly government in Afghanistan, Pakistan would always accuse India's RAW and Afghan NDS of working together to sponsor TTP as a covert war against Pakistan. But we have denied these allegations, and it has never given any evidence to show that India or Afghanistan was sponsoring TTP. Is that clear? Recently, when Afghan Taliban came to power in 2021, they had struck an agreement between the Pakistani government and the TTP. A ceasefire had been called. But last year, TTP has broken that ceasefire and it has started the attacks against Pakistan again. You might have read in news, in the last 10 to 12 months, Pakistan has seen some major terror attacks. Most of them have been carried out by TTP. So the rise of TTP is a very credible threat to the very survival of Pakistan. The fear is if the Pakistani state collapses, terrorists will run over the country, and the biggest fear is that Pakistan has nuclear weapons. What if the terror groups get hold of nuclear arsenal? That is the concern for India, US, and all the global powers. So TTP is definitely a threat for the region, and It is posing a major threat to Pakistan right now. That's why Pakistan is targeting this group along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. In fact, because of TTP, Pakistan's relations with Afghan Taliban also has been affected, because the Afghan Taliban government is not acting against TTP, as they look at each other as brotherly organizations which are connected to each other. Both are made up of the Pashtuns in the region. So Afghan Taliban is not targeting the TTP. Afghan Taliban is not targeting the TTP. So Pakistan is furious at this. And Pakistan has conducted its own airstrikes and military operations along the border. And some of these attacks have landed in Afghan territory. So Afghan Taliban has criticized Pakistan's military actions. And Pakistan is blaming Afghan Taliban for tolerating TTP. So this has led to differences between these close allies. For many decades, Pakistan and Afghan Taliban were very close. Pakistan had used Afghan Taliban to target India, to breed anti-India terror groups. But now finally differences have come up between them because of the TTP and its terrorism against Pakistan. Is that clear? Next, ETIM. Any idea which country does it operate in? ETIM. Good. Abhijit, Vaishna, Sanya, Ghanshyam and few others have given the right answer. Very good. It operates in China, in the Xinjiang province. China's westernmost province, Xinjiang, which borders Central Asia and Pakistan, and also our Jammu and Kashmir. This province is home to the Uyghur Muslim minority. It is home to the Uyghur Muslims who are in minority. They are the religious minorities in China. And Communist China has repeatedly targeted, oppressed, and discriminated against the Uyghurs. Since many decades, Uyghurs have resisted the Chinese occupation, just like China annexed Tibet and crushed Tibetan Buddhists. Similarly, when PRC was formed, the Communist Chinese state expanded territory towards Xinjiang as well and forcefully annexed these areas. And since then, it has crushed the native Uyghur Muslims. It directly targets their faith. It has committed human rights violations, allegedly. So some of the Uyghurs have taken up radicalism and extremism, and they are leading a terrorist war against China. ETIM is the terror group they have founded. It stands for East Turkestan Islamic Movement. The East Turkestan Islamic Movement. Is that clear? The goal of ETIM is to liberate Xinjiang from Chinese occupation, to break Xinjiang away from China and establish Xinjiang and the nearby regions as a separate country called East Turkestan, which would be a country for the Uyghur Muslims. All right. Now, this group has connections with many terror groups in the Af-Pak border. See, the terror ecosystem present along Af-Pak border has spread to Central Asia as well. Even in Central Asia region, radicalism, extremism has gone up because of terrorism that Pakistan has created and bred in the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. So groups like ETIM, they have close connections with other terror groups and criminal cartels that are operating here in the Afghanistan-Pakistan belt. So in this case, China becomes concerned about terrorism because ETIM has carried out many attacks in Xinjiang and in other parts of China. So since it's a threat to China, China tries to act against terrorism, and it has concerns about terrorism from Afghanistan-Pakistan belt. But when it comes to terrorism against India, China does not take the same position. It shields Pakistan, protects Pakistan, but it only wants action on ETIM. This is the hypocrisy of global powers like China. Is that clear? China is accused of committing very serious human rights violations against the Uyghurs. It has pushed lakhs of Uyghurs into these so-called re-education camps. In Xinjiang, it has set up these detention facilities, right? It's like a jail, essentially. And lakhs of Uyghurs are forcefully pushed into these facilities, and China calls them re-education camps. China says it is de-radicalizing the Uyghurs. In the name of de-radicalization, it is forcing the Uyghurs to violate their faith, to do acts and practices which are against their religion. It's forcing them to consume alcohol and pork meat, which is haram in Islam, right? So China is forcing them to do this, and this is a grave violation of religious freedom. It's a violation of fundamental rights. So that is why US and European countries have targeted China with sanctions for the violations it is committing against Uyghurs and the Tibetans. Is that clear? Even China is under sanctions from US and Western countries. It's because of human rights violations in Tibet and in Xinjiang. So that is ETIM. Next, Islamic State or ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, they're all the same. One of the most notorious groups to have come up in the recent past. The group rose to prominence in 2014 in the Iraq-Syria region. It is a direct outcome of the disastrous military intervention of the US and the covert wars going on in the region. Many countries are responsible, directly or indirectly, for the rise of ISIS or Islamic State. Is that clear? The US carried out an illegal invasion of Iraq in 2003 to topple Saddam Hussein. US and UK, they generated false intelligence that Saddam Hussein was developing weapons of mass destruction. But these were all lies. WMDs or weapons of mass destruction were never found in Iraq. Their goal was to topple the regime, to topple Saddam Hussein and establish a government which would be pro-US and pro-Western countries. This invasion of Iraq by the Western countries destabilized the region, destabilized Iraq completely. It gave rise to sectarian conflicts. It created a breeding ground for extremists. Because as Iraq didn't have a stable government and conflicts broke out between Shias, Sunnis, and other communities, it became a breeding ground for extremists and terrorists, and Iraq was not able to deal with the rise in extremism and terrorism because it didn't have a stable government because of the war that was imposed on the country by US and UK. These disastrous consequences gave rise to a fertile ground for extremists to thrive. Is that clear? Then later in Syria, Western countries, along with West Asian powers like Saudi, UAE, they all pushed a civil war into Syria as part of their rivalry with Iran. They sponsored a rebellion against the Syrian president, who's an ally of Iran. Iran and Syria are Shia powers, whereas Saudi, UAE, and others are Sunni powers. So because of their intense geopolitical rivalry, right, they sponsored a rebellion. They misused a revolutionary movement that was going on in the region called Arab Spring. Across West Asia and North Africa, a revolutionary pro-democracy movement had started called Arab Spring movement. It was spreading from Tunisia to Egypt to many other countries. So this movement spread to Syria as well. But US and Saudi Arabia and the others, they misused the movement to deliberately topple the Syrian government, which was an ally of Iran. So this destabilization carried out by US and Saudi gave rise to extremist outfits which could thrive in this region. Right? In the Iraq-Syria belt, multiple extremist groups were thriving under the sectarian divides that had come up. And ironically, the US was working with an outfit called Al-Nusra, the Al-Nusra Front, which operates in Iraq and Syria. It is actually a branch of Al-Qaeda. It's a faction of Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria. When the US was trying to destabilize Syria to target the Syrian president and his government, they worked with a terrorist group called Al-Nusra Front, which is an Al-Qaeda branch, Al-Qaeda faction in Iraq and Syria. Now look at the irony of this. In Afghanistan, they were fighting Al-Qaeda. But in Iraq and Syria, they're working with Al-Qaeda factions, but just because it is serving their interest. The American interests were being served as Al-Nusra Front was fighting against Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian president, who was an Iranian ally. Though they were working to topple the Syrian government, and US and few other powers, even Israel is no less, Israel and these Sunni powers, they aligned together to sponsor the rebellion in Syria, which destabilized the country. Before these events happened, Iraq and Syria were stable countries. Even though they were dictatorships and authoritarian countries, they were very stable. They didn't see any terrorism as such. But because of this external interference and the destabilization carried out, Iraq and Syria, they lost strong governments. When governance weakens, when there is a power vacuum, it will become a breeding ground for extremists, right? So all these extremists who are thriving here, they came together under the leadership of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Under the leadership of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, many of these terrorists were united and he gave a call for Islamic State. By 2009-2010, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi had emerged as the top terror leader in Iraq, Syria, and he rallied support amongst all the extremists, and he gave a call for forming an Islamic caliphate. He said he will establish an Islamic State. They'll capture territory of Iraq and Syria, topple the governments, throw out the foreign powers, and they'll form an Islamic State called a caliphate. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi even succeeded in capturing territory. By 2014, this outfit had got tremendous support by various extremist forces here. They had enough funds and weapons as well. And in 2014, all of a sudden, they ran across Iraq and Syria, capturing large territories in this region. So with this territorial control, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi declared that an Islamic caliphate had been formed. He declared himself as the caliph, right? The territory that they captured was as large as Great Britain. As large as Great Britain. Such a large territory was captured by ISIS in Iraq and Syria. It started enforcing the rigid Sharia law, started targeting all the non-believers, and committed brutal atrocities in the region and beyond. Is that clear? ISIS very quickly became the most notorious terrorist outfit. And its method of operation was very different from Al-Qaeda. If Al-Qaeda was the most feared terror organization until 2014, it was replaced by a new terror group called ISIS. Very quickly, ISIS became the most notorious and the most dangerous terrorist organization. See, ISIS was different in many ways compared to Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda has a very centralized leadership. It operates in a very traditional method, right? It had very limited funds available. Whereas ISIS disrupted the terror industry. It was like a startup disrupting the tech industry, right? Many experts have drawn this comparison regarding how ISIS and Al-Qaeda were in competition actually, like which group will be more brutal, which group can attract more support and more popularity. We saw this competition breaking out between ISIS and Al-Qaeda from 2014 to 2018. Because until then, Al-Qaeda, which was the most prominent group, was getting all the donations. It was getting all the support and funds from extremists around the world. But now all of a sudden, there was a new entrant, a new player, right, which actually succeeded in forming a so-called caliphate, declared a caliph as well. So in that regard, ISIS was more successful than Al-Qaeda. It was showing results. So it immediately got tremendous global support. And moreover, it operated on a decentralized structure. Even though there is a central leadership in Iraq and Syria, which was headed by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, it relied on social media and the internet to spread the propaganda, to spread the religious propaganda. In that regard, it was a new age terror group, which was leveraging technology, using various social media platforms like Telegram, even WhatsApp and WeChat, Facebook, right, and many other encrypted applications. These apps were being used to carry out propaganda and raise recruitment from around the world. Essentially, it was operating on the franchisee model, right? The central leadership would only give out propaganda material, spread the ideology, circulate some videos, etc. But from around the world, radicals were getting self radicalized. Self radicalization was being seen around the world, where extremists were taking up ISIS ideology on their own without any push from the central leadership. Whereas Al Qaeda was never like this. Al Qaeda was a very centralized structure, very conservative, traditional outfit, where the terror leaders had to, move around. They had to preach, raise support from around the world. They operated in a very traditional and limited manner. But ISIS was the one which really leveraged technology, especially the internet and social media, and spread its propaganda and almost carried out a franchisee model of terrorism. Meaning anyone in any part of the world could abide by their propaganda, fall prey to their radicalization, and commit acts of terrorism in their name. ISIS would not even know that this guy is their terrorist. They wouldn't even provide any funds or weapons, right? So around the world, people on social media would get self-radicalized and they would carry out attacks on their own. In many cases, there were lone wolf terrorists, that is, a single individual who was self-radicalized on the internet, who would commit an attack and then give credit to ISIS. This was never happening with Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda had to struggle to plan and execute a major attack, right? It had to get directly involved in funding, in planning, in execution, and then claim credit for the attack. But ISIS would simply deliver the propaganda. Extremists would get indoctrinated, carry out attacks on their own, and then give credit to ISIS. ISIS would have never given funds or weapons to them. Is that clear? So as a result, the scale of threat posed by ISIS was many times higher. And as it captured territory, a vast territory, it gained control of oil fields and several factories in Iraq and Syria. So it started raising a lot of revenue apart from the donations that were coming in. Apart from the donations coming in from extremists, it started generating its own revenue like a government. It controlled many oil fields in Iraq and Syria along with certain factories and some resources. It started selling them on the black market, started trafficking them. It started engaging in organized crime to raise massive funds for its terrorist operations. So very quickly, it became the most notorious terrorist outfit, right? So from countries around the world, extremists were indoctrinated through their propaganda on social media, and even many educated youth, right? Many youth who had nothing to do with radicalism, they got brainwashed, they got indoctrinated by ISIS ideology, right? Even India saw the impact as many self-radicalized youth, they tried traveling to Iraq and Syria to fight for ISIS, to join the caliphate. Many succeeded as well. Several students, software engineers, doctors, right? And even the regular crowd. Many of them got self-radicalized. At least a few hundred to few thousand youth of India were self-radicalized in states like Maharashtra, Karnataka, Kerala, UP and Bihar, then even Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, right? So all these parts of India, several youth, even educated youth, got self-radicalized by ISIS ideology on the internet. Many traveled to Iraq and Syria to fight for ISIS. Some of them have died in Iraq and Syria itself. Some of them have come back and they definitely pose a threat to India. So many of them have been arrested, many of them have been punished, and there are others who traveled to Afghanistan because a branch of ISIS came up in Afghanistan called the ISIS-K, ISIS Khorasan province. The ISIS Khorasan province, or ISIS-K, is the ISIS branch in Afghanistan. So several Indian youth who were radicalized traveled to Afghanistan as well to fight for ISIS-K. So India has been closely working with US and other countries to target the Islamic State. Right? There are self-radicalized youth in India as well who have tried to plan attacks within India. In the last 2-3 years itself, there have been modules, ISIS modules, which were planning attacks in India, but Indian agencies are keeping a close watch on these terror modules. We have increased our surveillance of social media. Our intelligence agencies, IB and RAW, and even NIA, they closely watch social media. Even NTRO, they intercept the internet traffic. They keep a check on social media platforms. We work with US and European countries and other like-minded countries and share intelligence with them. Understood? So we have detained several youth. We have prevented several youth from traveling as well. Due to improved surveillance, our agencies would detect some of the youths who are booking tickets to West Asian countries or Turkey, from where they would travel further into Iraq and Syria. So Indian officials would prevent these misled, indoctrinated youth from traveling. And since they haven't committed any act of terrorism as such, we adopted a more softer approach towards them to promote de-radicalization. Those who hadn't joined these groups yet, those who were simply indoctrinated on the internet, who are still booking tickets and trying to travel, they would be detained by the authorities and they would be counseled. They would be counseled by the community leaders, by the government officials, by mental health counselors, by the family members, to promote de-radicalization. Right? Because technically they haven't committed the act of terrorism yet. But of course, the law allows for prosecuting these individuals as well. Just membership of a proscribed terror organization is enough to be charged under UAPA. But initially, India adopted a softer approach in 2016-2017 because many youth were being largely misled on the wrong path. Because the government also saw that targeting them would further create more resentment. So the government was trying to bring them back to the mainstream, bring them back on the right path. But as the threat increased, there were many of them who fought for the terrorists, engaged in acts of terrorism themselves, and many came back to India and tried planning attacks in India. So then India became very strict, and now any ISIS individual is charged and punished very severely. We have broken many ISIS modules in India, right? There's very close intelligence sharing with US and other countries, and we have broken many terror modules of the ISIS. Is that clear? But today, ISIS no longer controls the territory. The so-called caliphate does not exist anymore. The caliphate has been destroyed. The caliphate has been decimated due to the combined efforts of US and Russia. US and Russia delivered a devastating defeat to ISIS in 2018-2019. The US carried out ground operations. It aligned with the Kurd groups, the Kurd insurgent groups that are found in Iraq, Syria, Turkey border. The CIA of the US would work with the Kurd insurgents and use their support to target ISIS. Several battles took place in Iraq and Syria, and US played an important role. The American Special Forces and US intelligence agencies like CIA, they played a key role along with the Kurd groups to crush the caliphate in Iraq and Syria. Along with these ground intelligence-led operations, Russia carried out devastating airstrikes, especially in Syria. Because Syria is a Russian ally, right? And ISIS was a threat to the Syrian president and the Syrian government. So Russia has a military base as well in Syria. It has major influence in Syria. So to protect Syria and Russian influence in Syria, Russia launched military strikes, airstrikes. It even deployed the private military contractor, Wagner Group. It deployed the Wagner Group mercenaries, private mercenaries, to take on ISIS. So Russian operations from air and land and American operations from land delivered a crushing defeat to ISIS and now they are pushed into a small corner. They're pushed into a very small corner in Iraq and Syria. Is that clear? In places like Mosul and few other areas, that's where ISIS is still active. But otherwise, the so-called caliphate has been destroyed. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was killed. He has been assassinated, right? But this ideology will not die so quickly. Even if you destroy the caliphate in Iraq and Syria, it will not die so quickly because the ideology thrives on the internet. Is that clear? There are many extremists around the world who are self-radicalized. Believe it or not, in US and Europe, there are Christians who got converted and adopted ISIS ideology and committed acts of terrorism. That is the appeal of ISIS. There are many lone wolf terrorists and individual groups that carried out major attacks across Europe in 2015 and 2016. Many European cities like Paris, Berlin, London, right, even in Belgium, several incidents happened where some terrorists from ISIS, they would have come through the refugee route. The refugees who are coming from West Asia and Africa, they cross the Mediterranean and they enter Europe, right, to find asylum. Through the refugee route, several ISIS terrorists sneaked into Europe and planned and executed major attacks across European cities. There were individuals as well, lone wolf terrorists who are acting on their own. Now, it's very difficult to deal with lone wolf terrorism because when a large group is planning an attack, they will leave some evidence behind, some digital evidence, or some traces are left behind, which is caught by intelligence agencies. Intelligence agencies, they maintain a wide surveillance through human assets, technical assets, and through surveillance. So they will pick up some information and they'll disrupt the attack from happening. But when a single individual is planning an attack, it's almost impossible to identify those individuals. And that too, they carry out attacks in a very simple manner. They don't go for sophisticated attacks. When groups are planning an attack, when an entire group of people are planning an attack, they go for sophisticated attacks. They try to procure arms and weapons. They try to assemble explosives, right? They choose their targets carefully. So a lot of planning will be involved. They'll leave some evidence behind and they'll get caught. But in case of lone wolf terrorists, if there is some individual in some remote area and this guy who's always on the internet has become self-radicalized, and tomorrow he comes out of the house with a knife or with a basic gun, or even drives his car or truck into a crowded group of people and kills them. So how do you deal with them? How do you figure out that this individual is becoming a terrorist? It's very, very challenging to deal with lone wolf terrorism. There have been many such incidents, all right, where ISIS terrorists who are self-radicalized, they have taken cars or trucks or buses and rammed them into crowded places, killing as many people as possible. They have taken knives and other rudimentary weapons, even gas cylinders, and set it on fire in public places. They've stabbed people, right, trying to kill as many people as possible. So these are lone wolf terror incidents associated with ISIS. So this remains a concern and a challenge. That is why tackling the threat on social media is a priority for intelligence agencies. We will study this in the coming chapter. We'll understand the threats on social media. We'll come to it again. In Sri Lanka, there has been a major concern for us. In Sri Lanka, a terror group called National Tawheed Jamaat, the National Tawheed Jamaat, or NTJ, it carried out a major attack in Sri Lanka, which is the Easter Sunday bombings of 2019. The Easter Sunday bombings in 2019, where multiple churches were attacked by the NTJ. Now, this terror group is also affiliated with ISIS. It gave credit to the ISIS, and ISIS took the credit as well. So NTJ in Sri Lanka is like ISIS branch in Sri Lanka. And the concern for India is that NTJ terrorists have presence in India. In Kerala and Tamil Nadu, these NTJ terrorists who planned and executed the Easter Sunday bombings, they were frequently coming to Kerala and Tamil Nadu as part of their preparation for the attacks. India was keeping a watch on them. India's RAW had surveillance on these NTJ terrorists, and we had passed on intelligence to Sri Lanka regarding a major upcoming attack. but Sri Lanka failed to prevent it. And following this, India has been working closely with Sri Lanka to keep track of the rise of Islamic State in Sri Lanka. This is a credible threat for India. Given Sri Lanka's proximity to India and the interest we have in Sri Lanka, the presence of any such ISIS affiliate is a threat for India as well. That's why NIA's jurisdiction was expanded. NIA was given foreign jurisdiction so it could investigate such cases which are connected to India. Is that clear? So these are some basic details you should know about Islamic State. You should be especially familiar with the competition seen between ISIS and Al Qaeda. Right? They were competing for influence, for support and funds. And ISIS clearly emerged on top because of the different model it was following compared to Al Qaeda. Next, just a few last points. After that, maybe we can take a short break. We'll close the chapter as well. Boko Haram. Have you heard of this terror group? Anyone? Can someone tell me in the comments? In which country does it operate? Very good. Nigeria. Boko Haram is a terror group in Nigeria. You might have read news reports that hundreds of school girls were kidnapped, right? In an African country. These kind of attacks are carried out by Boko Haram. It was aligned with Al Qaeda's ideology. Now it is shifting towards Islamic State's ideology. It's giving its support to ISIS. So Boko Haram is a Nigeria-based terror group. It operates in Chad and Niger as well. It has presence in the neighboring countries of Chad and Niger, and it remains a major threat. Next, Al-Shabaab. Have you heard of it? Where does it operate? Al-Shabaab. Sania and Anandu are giving the right answer. Very good. Somalia. It's a Somalian terror group aligned with Al-Qaeda. So Al-Shabaab has controlled Somalia from 30 plus years, and it is this group which sponsors piracy. The Somalian pirates who attack ships, commercial ships, and hold the ship hostage to get ransoms, right? They're all supported by Al-Shabaab. That's how Al-Shabaab raises funds for its terror activities. So Al-Shabaab is a major threat. And Somalia, right, is quite close to India. We share the same water body, Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean. The threats in Somalia and the piracy threat, the terror threat, could spill over to Maldives, Sri Lanka, and Lakshadweep Islands of India. So we are concerned about the presence of terrorism in Horn of Africa as well. Then in East Africa, there is a rising concern for India from Kenya to Tanzania and even in Mozambique. In these East African countries where India has major interests, we even have a strong diaspora in some of these countries. There are several Indian families present in Kenya and Tanzania. So in this region, which is very close to India, Al-Qaeda was a concern and a threat previously. In fact, in 1999, Al-Qaeda had attacked the US embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. So Al-Qaeda has always had a major presence in these East African countries. Now recently, Islamic State's presence and influence has started rising. All right. A couple of years ago, an entire city in Mozambique was taken over by Islamic State terrorists. ISIS terrorists in Mozambique, they took over an entire city, planning to turn it into a caliphate. It took an intense battle to liberate the city captured by ISIS. So these developments in East Africa destabilizes the Indian Ocean. And given our investments, our interests, the presence of our community here, it is a major threat for India. The rise of terrorism in East Africa is also a concern for India. All right. Then in Philippines, even in Philippines, there is a terrorist outfit. Then in Indonesia, Al-Qaeda and ISIS have created a presence for themselves. So Southeast Asia is also not free from terrorism. There are few radical terror outfits operating here as well. Is that clear? So India works closely with all these countries to counter terrorism. Now coming to the last two outfits, which I've mentioned in the previous classes as well, Hamas and Hezbollah. I think Hamas needs no introduction right now. I'm sure all of you would have heard about it. It's a notorious terrorist group operating in Gaza Strip. It claims to fight for Palestinian rights to liberate Palestine from Israeli occupation. But in reality, it's a terrorist organization committing brutal atrocities against humanity. Right? No matter what you believe in, the acts of Hamas cannot be justified, especially the latest attack. Right? Yes, Israel also uses disproportionate force. It is accused of committing human rights violations against Palestinians. And Palestinian rights have been snatched away by Israel. Right? That's why almost every country, including India, we support the two-state solution. We want Palestine to be formed as a separate country. But that does not mean you resort to brutal terror acts in the name of liberation. Right? So what Hamas has done right now, it's an earth-shattering event. It's going to change the very face of West Asia. Israel will not spare Gaza Strip, and in the name of targeting Hamas, it will use brutal force against innocent Palestinian civilians as well. So Hamas is seen as a terrorist outfit by most countries, but there are a few countries which support Hamas. Hezbollah is another terror outfit operating in Lebanon for the same cause. From Lebanon, Hezbollah targets Israel. Even this group is fighting to liberate Palestine. All right. So both Hamas and Hezbollah are supported by few major powers in the region, such as Iran, Syria, and even Turkey and Qatar have very close connections with Hamas and Hezbollah. All right. These are some of the major supporters of Hamas and Hezbollah. So again, let's not go into the details of the attack which happened recently, but one thing is for sure, Hamas has tried this major act of terrorism, one as a retaliation against the atrocities that Israel was also carrying out. In the last few years especially, hundreds of Palestinians have been killed in West Bank and in Gaza Strip, where Israel is accused of using excessive force, where Israel is accused of committing human rights violations. So Hamas sees this as a justified retaliation, but it's not. It's a blatant act of terrorism, killing thousands of civilians, killing children, old age people. Right? That's not a liberation movement. That is outright terrorism. Along with that, maybe Hamas has one more strategy in mind. See, right now, West Asian geopolitics was changing completely. A radical transformation was happening. Many Arab powers were recognizing Israel. Egypt and Jordan, they had already made peace with Israel. And recently, Abraham Accords were signed, where UAE and Bahrain also gave recognition to Israel and set up ties with Israel. Then Sudan and Morocco from Africa also recognized Israel and recognized the country and set up ties with Israel. And now there was a rumor, a very, very massive rumor, that Saudi Arabia and Israel might establish relations. That would have been a transformative event. US was mediating between Saudi and Israel to work out a deal to end their hostilities forever. You need to look at the IMEC corridor as well in this context. The IMEC corridor that was announced and launched at G20, the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, backed by US. It includes both Saudi Arabia and Israel, right? So this was a clear sign that the geopolitics of West Asia was changing, and US was mediating a deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel to set up ties between them. And recently, China had mediated a settlement between the Sunni powers and Shia powers, leading to normalization of ties between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So essentially, the dynamics of West Asia was changing, where the regional rivalries were being sorted. And this is not good news for Hamas. If regional rivalries are sorted between Shia Sunni powers and the Muslim countries and Israel, then no one will support Hamas anymore. So it's out of desperation that Hamas has carried out this attack, this brutal attack, with a clear intention to disrupt the processes that were taking place in West Asia. But now, the atrocities it has committed, the scale and the kind of violence it committed, it was a land, air, sea attack, right? Hamas terrorists infiltrated from across land by breaking the border, through air, through paragliders, and also through the sea route, through Mediterranean Sea. They attacked many cities, targeted civilians, not just the defense forces. They have taken hundreds of people hostage, right? And they haven't distinguished between women, children, and old age people. So the brutal violence they have committed, the mindless killing, rapes, and murders that have been carried out on Saturday and Sunday, right? It is something that has shocked the world. It is unprecedented. Nothing on this scale has ever been seen in the world, right? Not even 9/11 or 26/11 attacks compare with regard to the scale, the violence that was used. Rather, the strategy was quite similar to the Mumbai attacks that India experienced. So every country, almost every country, have criticized the attack. They've called it an act of terrorism. And Israel, of course, has a right to retaliate against Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist outfit. But Israel needs to exercise caution. But it, in the name of targeting Hamas, it can't go on to violate the rights of civilians, Palestinian civilians, right? So it's a very complex situation. It's a developing situation as well. But do know that Hamas has committed such brutal acts of terrorism in the past as well. This is not new. In the last 15 years, Hamas is known to commit such brutal acts of terrorism. It has carried out many such killings. It has repeatedly fired rockets against Israeli civilian population. It has committed several kidnappings. All right. So now Hezbollah also seems to be joining Hamas, and it is looking to put pressure on Israel through Lebanon. So these are two Palestinian outfits backed by some regional powers like Iran, Qatar, Turkey, and Syria. So these are the major terrorist outfits of the world. All right. So let's stop the discussion here. Maybe we can take a short break. We'll come back and then look at some. We'll come back. Starting with Northeast insurgency. First question, Femina is asking why the CCIT is not adopted. I think I explained why CCIT has not been adopted. Because enough support has not been given by other UN members. For any UN convention to be adopted, it requires a certain support. Majority support would be needed for the resolution to be adopted. Right? To become a UN convention, most of the members have to support the convention. But as I explained, some countries which have used terrorism as a weapon, they are worried that they'll be held accountable. So they are not supporting the convention pushed by India. Many others are worried that, like Latin American countries, they're worried that the provisions suggested by India are very strict. It could lead to misuse of the law, where authoritarian governments especially could target political dissent in the name of fighting terrorism. Some countries, they want exceptions to be made for groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. So all these countries which don't agree with India's proposal, they have not given support, and that's why CCIT convention has not been adopted. Next, Prashant is asking, Hamas and Hezbollah are claiming parts of Palestine, which is now with Israel. But once upon a time, it was Palestine. One cannot claim part as historical basis. If we Indians are going to claim, then half of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Myanmar will be ours. Is it not? No, Prashant, actually not. See, in modern times, this area, which is Israel, it was belonging to Palestinians. It was Israel which was created later. It was Israel which was created against international law. The two-state solution had been proposed to form two separate countries at least. That would have been at least a fair solution, right? It was Israel which was formed on historical basis, not Palestine. Palestine existed in modern times. It was the Jews who took over the region, formed Israel, and then occupied Palestinian territories. So it's a very complex history. It requires an entire class for me to explain the Israel-Palestine conflict. So in international relations, don't worry, we'll cover this topic in detail. We have an entire chapter for West Asia where we will discuss Israel-Palestine conflict. But what you're saying is incorrect. It's not Palestinians who are claiming on historical basis. It is Israel which has formed itself on historical basis, right? When two-state solution was proposed by the UN in 1947, that at least was a fair solution where two countries would have come up, one for Palestinian Arabs, one for the Jews. But Israel broke the two-state solution. It broke the UN provision and declared unilateral independence. It never allowed Palestine to be formed. And since then, it has fought multiple wars and it has even occupied Palestinian territories. Both West Bank and Gaza, they are under Israeli occupation. Is that clear? So what you're saying is not correct. It's not historically correct. Next, Gagan is asking, if Hafiz Saeed is declared a global terrorist, then how come he's still roaming free in Pakistan? Is not Pakistan bound by UNSC resolution? See, this is how our dear friend Pakistan behaves. Yes, of course, Pakistan is bound by the UN commitments, but it is not serious with regard to tackling terrorism. Despite Hafiz Saeed and others being designated as global terrorists, it allows them to operate freely. It has taken some very limited action. Sometimes it has arrested these terrorists, but it has never pressed terrorism charges against them. All right. Recently, we used another global platform to target Pakistan, which is FATF, the Financial Action Task Force. Through FATF, we got Pakistan grey listed because it was not acting against terror financing and money laundering. And under this pressure of FATF being acting against Pakistan and grey listing Pakistan, then Pakistan took some steps to tackle terror financing. It arrested few terrorists, filed some charges against them. But it is not serious in tackling terrorism. It's not serious about implementing the UN provisions. That is why Pakistan is criticized by India and many countries for breaking these norms and for allowing terror groups to operate freely. Chituri is asking, sir, what kind of rewards these terrorists give to newly recruited youth and how do they radicalize the youth? See, it depends from one terror group to another, but usually they prey on the weak minds. They target victims who already have resentment, a sense of injustice, right? They'll brainwash them with religious ideology first, right? Propagating that their religion is supreme, other religions have to be targeted. They promise that they'll get rewards in heaven, God will reward them, right? Many such strategies are used, and this is across religions, not just in one particular faith. And they also provide monetary benefits. They give them a lot of money. They say they'll take care of their family, right? Usually they target the poor youth, right? People who are very poor, who come from very backward areas. They target them, radicalize and brainwash them, and they promise a sum of money which is given to the family. So some of the youth get motivated by it, right? Because the family can lead a good life after that. So they're ready to sacrifice themselves. So many such strategies are used, from religious indoctrination to monetary benefits. Both are used along with the sense of hatred or injustice or resentment they have against the other side. So by using all these tactics, these terrorists radicalize the youth. Saurabh is asking, airstrikes in Gaza, will it cause humanitarian crisis? It will help Hamas to get sympathy. Is there any other way to fight Hamas? See, Hamas is not Palestine. Please understand that. Hamas is a terrorist outfit. It claims to represent Palestinians, but it's not. Many Palestinians themselves reject Hamas. All right? And the airstrikes and the large-scale military operation that Israel has launched against Gaza Strip will, of course, lead to a humanitarian crisis. It has already caused a major humanitarian crisis. In fact, Gaza is already known as an open-air prison because Israel has surrounded Gaza Strip on all the sides, blockaded Gaza Strip completely from many years. It doesn't allow any supplies to go in without its approval. And now, after the attack of Hamas, as part of its retaliation, Israel has blockaded even basic supplies. It has cut off the supply of food, water, and electricity as well. So any large military operation on this scale, there are 2 million people living there. Not all of them are terrorists. Some of them support Hamas. Yes, some of them side with the terrorists, but there are many Palestinians who are innocents. So large-scale airstrikes and military raids will not, it will not discriminate, right? It will not just target the terrorists, it will target civilians as well. So it will lead to a humanitarian crisis, but it will not create sympathy for Hamas. No one is going to sympathize with Hamas. Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization. There is no doubt about it. Except for their supporters. There are few countries which support them. Other than them, nobody will support Hamas. Even if there is a humanitarian crisis affecting the civilians, Hamas will not get any sympathy. Hamas will not get any support. All right. So guys, these are the questions. So I was mentioning this group called FATF, right? Financial Action Task Force. We will discuss that under money laundering. That's why I did not mention that here, because we have a separate chapter called money laundering, where we deal with terror financing as well. So under the chapter of money laundering, we will discuss Financial Action Task Force. There you will understand how India has used FATF to target Pakistan, how Pakistan was grey listed. What is the impact of getting grey listed or blacklisted by the FATF? We'll study all of that under money laundering. Now let's take up some previous questions. I want you guys to know what kind of questions are asked from this important chapter. In the past, we have got many questions here. For example, in 2014, 2016, 2015, several questions were asked. Even in the latest exam, 2022, several questions related to terrorism have come up. Let's look at a couple of them. Let's see how you can approach these topics. Let's say we'll take up question number 2. The question says, religious indoctrination via digital media has resulted in Indian youth joining the ISIS. What is ISIS and its mission? How can ISIS be dangerous for the internal security of our country? It's actually a very simple, straightforward question following the rise of Islamic State, following the formation of the Islamic Caliphate in Iraq and Syria. So I explained how ISIS has followed a different model to carry out recruitment and to spread its propaganda. It has mainly used internet and social media platforms. So you explain about this in your introduction. You point out the rise of ISIS, that ISIS is this terrorist organization in Iraq, Syria, which established this so-called caliphate, and its strategy has been mainly to use social media to spread its radical ideology and propaganda. It has carried out religious indoctrination through various social media platforms like Telegram, WeChat, and even WhatsApp and Facebook, and many other encrypted applications. Point out how this creates terrorists around the world, how it promotes self-radicalization. Explain how it is a franchisee kind of model, a decentralized model that ISIS created. So once you explain this, discuss the goal of ISIS. Mention that its goal is to form a caliphate. Form this caliphate and enforce the strict Sharia law, which leads to violation of human rights and fundamental rights. Point out how ISIS influence has reached India as well. That is the next part of the question. Explain how few Indian youth have been indoctrinated by ISIS ideology on the internet. How many of them traveled to Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan to fight for ISIS. How many ISIS modules came up in India trying to plan attacks in India. Right? So explain all these important points, and then provide the strategy of India. How has India been trying to tackle Islamic State? One, we have increased our surveillance of social media platforms to watch out for these elements. We have prevented several indoctrinated youth from traveling to Iraq and Syria. We have collaborated with foreign intelligence agencies. We are sharing intelligence with them to keep a check on ISIS activities. And we have also broken up many ISIS modules in the country and acted strictly against them. We have arrested these ISIS terrorists, pressed terror charges against them. Right? So our intelligence and law enforcement agencies have been proactively working to defeat ISIS. But in India, there is no large-scale support for ISIS. It's a few hundred to few thousand youth who have been misled and indoctrinated by the ideology on internet and social media platforms. So provide this explanation, all these points. If you know any recent events or examples, add that into the answer, and that completes your question. That completes your answer to this question. All right. Look at this third question. It deals with hot pursuit and surgical strikes. The terms hot pursuit and surgical strikes are often used in connection with armed action against terror attacks. Discuss the strategic impact of such actions. This was asked because of Uri attacks and the surgical strikes that India carried out. All right. So you know what is a surgical strike? It's a precision strike conducted on foreign soil. You might use your special forces. It could be done even by using missiles or even by using fighter jets. Any precision strike on foreign territory is a surgical strike. You can explain how India retaliated against Uri attacks, targeted the terror launch pads across the LOC, and how Indian special forces, the para commandos of the Indian Army, infiltrated into POK and decimated several launch pads of Pakistan. Pakistan had created these terror launch pads to launch terrorists into India. So as a preemptive action, we targeted these launch pads and eliminated several terrorists. So a surgical strike is essentially a precision strike conducted using either land forces or even through aerial attacks. All right, so explain what is a surgical strike. Next, what is hot pursuit? In that year, since surgical strikes were carried out, there were many articles talking about similar action, and there were articles explaining what is a hot pursuit. As the name itself tells you, hot pursuit is basically a chase where security forces go behind terrorists and criminals. This term hot pursuit is used in the context of the maritime domain. In the seas and the oceans, if our security forces chase behind organized criminals, smugglers and traffickers or terrorists, that is called a hot pursuit. Basically, the forces are chasing the criminals and terrorists to apprehend them or to neutralize them. So when this happens in the seas, in the oceans, it's called a hot pursuit. It is recognized under UN Convention on Law of the Sea. The UN Convention on Law of the Sea gives the right to every country to engage in hot pursuit even in international waters. Not just in territorial waters where we have full jurisdiction, even beyond territorial waters of India, even in international waters, our forces can engage in hot pursuit to hunt terrorists and criminals who threaten our security. So hot pursuit is recognized under international law, but surgical strikes is not. Surgical strikes happen on land, meaning you're crossing your borders, entering a foreign country, conducting an operation on their soil. So that is a breach of their sovereignty. The other country might treat this as an act of war, even if your strike is justified. Is that clear? Even if you're targeting a terror group, even the surgical strike, even though it is justified from our side, the other country whose sovereignty has been breached, they can treat this as an act of war because the breach of sovereignty is not tolerated in international law. Under UN Charter, breach of any country's sovereignty is prohibited. So that is why surgical strikes are usually covert operations. But in this case, India went public with the operation. We openly declared that we carried out a surgical strike, right? So that's why you have to discuss the strategic impact of these actions. You need to discuss whether these actions will help end terrorism. The answer is no. Just few surgical strikes will not help you end terrorism. But definitely it has a short-term impact. It can deliver a higher cost to countries which are sponsoring these terrorists. It can be a very effective option in the short to medium term to deter the sponsoring country, to deter these terrorists from targeting us. So definitely there is an impact. There is a impact which helps in counter-terrorism, but doesn't mean it will end or wipe out terrorism. And there could be international consequences. Hot pursuit is recognized. We can enter international waters. Our Navy, our Coast Guard, or any other security force of India, they can enter the international waters and chase behind terrorists and criminals. This is recognized under UN clause. It has international validity. But surgical strike in a foreign country is illegal actually. Technically speaking, it is illegal. The other country can treat this as an act of war and a breach of their sovereignty, leading to diplomatic problems and international escalation. So you have to explain this. You have to bring out this explanation. Next, look at this question. Question number 4. It's actually related to what we discussed. How terrorism has become a competitive industry. This was a reference to the competition between ISIS and Al-Qaeda. How ISIS, Al-Qaeda were competing for influence and funds, right? So this is what we discussed as well. Then look at this question from 2019. Question number 6. It deals with OGWs, overground workers. Because in that year, India had acted against OGWs in Jammu and Kashmir. An organization known as Jamaat-e-Islami was accused of providing support to terrorists. India banned the organization and acted against it as well. So that's why this question was asked. The banning of Jamaat-e-Islami in J&K brought into focus the role of OGWs in assisting terrorist organizations. Examine the role played by these OGWs in assisting terror organizations in insurgency affected areas. Discuss measures to neutralize their influence. So what should you do? begin the answer by explaining who are OGWs, overground workers. See, OGWs are not terrorists exactly. Rather, they are civilians. They are regular civilians who have a normal life in the public domain, right? They are working overground, basically. They're working quite openly. But they are secretly helping, assisting the terrorists who are operating in our insurgency hit areas. All right, they themselves are not terrorists. They have a normal life, they have a normal job, they'll be working quite openly, visibly, but secretly they could be helping terrorists. Those elements, those civilians who are giving that support, that logistical support, especially to terrorists, to help in their acts of terrorism, they are classified as OGWs, overground workers. All right, this question was directly triggered by current affairs of that year. As India banned Jamaat-e-Islami as a OGW, that's why the question was asked. Now, we have already studied the role of these support elements. Now, be it with regard to Khalistan movement, be it the Naxal movement, be it Northeast insurgency or Jammu and Kashmir. In all these conflict zones of India, we have seen such local support being present. Now, didn't we discuss the local support in Naxal corridor? Right? Didn't we discuss the local support in Kashmir and Punjab? There could be these elements who are providing shelter to terrorists. They're not directly involved in the act of terrorism. Maybe when the terrorists are trying to hide, they might shelter them in their own home. They might arrange some funds for them. They might store weapons for them. They might help in their transportation. For example, they might provide vehicles to the terrorists to travel. They might arrange a bike or a car which the terrorists might use for a terror attack. They might help in their propaganda. So such indirect support which is extended by regular civilians to terrorists, right? This also is illegal. They are classified as OGWs, overground workers. So give examples from different conflict zones, from Naxal corridor, maybe from Kashmir or Northeast India. Explain that such local support does exist. There could be civilians giving such logistical support to terrorists. There could be a NGO, a social organization, providing legal support to terrorists who have been arrested. Even that is the work of OGWs. There are few Naxal sympathizers who give legal aid to Naxals who are arrested, right? So all these acts can be classified as the role of OGWs, overground workers. So what India does is that we have a graded response to deal with OGWs. Now, you can't treat OGWs just like you do with terrorists because they themselves have not committed an act of terrorism. So you have to categorize the OGWs depending on what support they are providing. And accordingly, you have to deal with them. Let's say there is a civilian who has been threatened, right? The terrorists might threaten them to give support. They might ask for food supplies. They might threaten them to give them a hiding place. So they have no choice. They're forced to help them or else they'll be targeted. The terrorists will kill the locals if they don't give them that support. So such OGWs can't be punished, right? They have to be advised not to help these extremists. They have to be kept under watch. The forces have to instruct them to share any such information immediately, to ask the help from our security forces. That is the approach for grade A OGWs who are just being threatened and forced. They have no other choice other than helping them. There could be another category of OGWs who are willingly helping them but giving some basic support, like arranging a vehicle for them, right? Or storing their weapons, holding the weapons for a while, and later the terrorists will come and take the weapons from them. This is limited support being given. So for against them, cases can be filed. They can be arrested and punished, but under relatively lower charges. But there could be other OGWs who are directly aiding terrorists and they even know when the attacks are going to happen and still they'll hide it from our security forces. Such OGWs who are closely involved with terrorists, who are involved in the planning and execution, right? Who know where the attack is happening, when the attack will happen, and still they stay silent. those OGWs will be delivered much stricter punishment. And all right, they'll be treated almost like terrorists under UAPA. They'll be charged under terror charges and they'll be punished very strictly. So such a graded response is there. It depends on a case-to-case basis. Depends on what kind of support they have extended. So this has been the measure India has implemented to deal with OGWs. These are supporters, local supporters of terror groups, insurgent groups who are working over ground. Is that clear? So these are the kind of questions UPSC will be asking you. We recently had a question in this year's mains exam. There was a question dealing with how our agencies are dealing with terrorism. UPSC asked to list out the role of different agencies of India and how they are dealing with counterterrorism. So we have to talk about IB, RAW, NIA, and other agencies to explain India's fight against terrorism. So these are the kind of basic questions that will come. Trust me, these are very simple. If you have understood everything that we have discussed, and if you can cover current affairs, the current developments, answering these questions will be very easy and very simple. All right. So this is where I would like to stop the discussion on terrorism. We have covered almost every topic. Trust me, don't go beyond this. This itself is enough. This is more than sufficient. Now let's move on to the next chapter. And let's look at the next conflict zone, which is the northeast region of India, the final conflict zone of India. So now we have covered the Naxal corridor, we have covered Punjab and the Khalistan movement, we have covered Kashmir and pan-India terrorism as well. We even had a discussion on global terrorism. Now let's focus on the last conflict zone of India, which is the northeast region, which has been affected by multiple insurgencies. The northeast region has been seeing insurgent movements from 1947 till now. Throughout India's independent history, in the last 75 years, northeast region has suffered from multiple insurgencies. In total, there have been at least 30 to 40 different insurgent organizations that have operated in northeast India. I'm not even underestimating. At least 30 to 40 different groups have operated here. All right. But the root cause for these groups, where they have operated, what is their agenda, it varies from group to group. It has changed from time to time. So we can't take a uniform approach to northeast India. We can't simply just focus on the general factors related to insurgency. We have to get very specific here. The northeast is actually a complex region. The geography is complex, the demography is complex. All these complexities have given rise to different root causes, and there have been different insurgencies that have been built on these root causes. So in Assam, for example, the nature of insurgency in Assam has been entirely different. Why insurgency came up in Assam is different from why insurgency came up in Nagaland. It's not the same. So don't assume insurgency across northeast India, they all have the same goals, they all started at the same time. They started at different times, right? Some insurgencies started in 1950s, 1960s. Some started in 1990s. Some insurgencies have come to an end, but some insurgencies are still thriving. All right. So there is a wide range within northeast insurgency. It varies from state to state. The root causes vary, the time period varies, and the threat that these groups have posed also varies. So what we will be doing is that first we will have a general discussion. Let's have a general discussion on northeast India. Let us understand why the region has seen so many insurgencies. How come so many insurgencies have not come up in South India, in Western India, right? Why the northeast region has been so badly affected? There must be some common factors. So based on this, we'll have a general common discussion, which applies for the whole northeast region. All right. So this is what we'll be doing today. Once we complete this discussion, then we will get very specific. We will have a specific discussion on all the major states and talk about the major insurgencies that have been witnessed. See, we need not cover all the insurgent movements. It's not possible. It's impossible from an examination point of view. As I told you, there are 30-40 different insurgencies. Not all of them are important for the exam. So I have shortlisted some of the most important insurgencies which have posed the biggest threat for India. The insurgencies which have really threatened our sovereignty and integrity, which have led to large-scale violence and terrorism, right? The insurgencies which have lasted for many, many years. So those insurgencies have been chosen for the class, and we will discuss them state by state. We'll start with Nagaland. We'll talk about Assam. We'll discuss Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura. So all these major states and the major insurgencies they have seen will be discussed and covered. So we'll understand their root cause, their specific root cause. We'll understand how it started, how it spread, what was the threat posed, what kind of support they had in Northeast India and in neighboring countries, and how India has tackled the threat, and what is the current status. So all these are very, very important topics for your exam. Because again, in current affairs, there are many developments happening. There are developments related to Naga insurgency and the Naga peace process. There are developments related to Bodo insurgency. You've all seen what has happened in Manipur in the last few months, right? The large-scale ethnic violence is connected to insurgency the state has witnessed. So there are many, many important developments that make the topic important for your exam. Is that clear? So let us start with the general discussion first. It will take maybe 15-20 minutes. I'll list out some points. I want all of you to write it down. By using this map, I'll be listing out some general factors which have played a direct role in enabling so many insurgencies in Northeast India. I want you guys to write it down because there can be a mains question. A 15-mark question can be asked. Explain the common factors, the general factors in Northeast India, which have contributed to so many insurgent movements, to multiple insurgent movements in the Northeast. Or why has Northeast region been so vulnerable to insurgency? Illustrate. So there, you have to carry out a general discussion. Explain some common factors here, which has contributed to so many insurgencies. All right. So let's start with this discussion. Let's cover this first. Then, depending on the time we are left with, we will start with state-wise discussion. Now, if you look at the map of Northeast India, I can tell you that the geography and the demography of the region is very complex, and this has directly contributed to multiple insurgencies. The geography of the place, the demography of the place, and even the history and culture of the place, they've all played a role in directly enabling insurgent movements. All right. For example, the first point, I'm sure many of you know that Northeast region is home to multiple ethnic groups. The Northeast region is a multi-ethnic society. There are many native indigenous communities. There are many native indigenous communities, and many of them are tribal communities. Is that clear? So this is a feature of human geography, the demography of Northeast India. From Assam to Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh to Meghalaya, across these states, right? If you look at the society of the region, it's a multi-ethnic, diverse society. The region is inhabited by several native indigenous communities and tribes, and they've inhabited this region from centuries. Even before India was born, even before the concept of India came up as a nation state, much before that, these indigenous communities have made this their homeland. All right. And if you know something about tribes and indigenous communities, you will know that they are very closely attached to their forests, to their land, to their culture, and they are very, very protective about their resources. This is what defines their identity. In fact, we had this same discussion with regard to Naxalism as well. When we spoke about the tribal community in central and eastern parts of India, in Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, in Telangana, right? When we understood why tribal communities supported Naxals, we spoke about the same issues. Now, this is a very popular and well accepted theory as well, that when tribals face a threat from the outside, if they feel threatened by any outsider, tribals generally they fight back quite fiercely, because please understand that tribals inherently are vulnerable. Ethnic groups, indigenous communities, they're very small communities, their numbers are very small. They'll have their own unique faith, unique culture, unique customs. They even speak unique languages. That is their identity, that represents their identity. If there is any outside interference or influence, or if outside powers are trying to control them, if outsiders are trying to snatch their land, their resources, if they're trying to push them away from their forests, tribal and native communities will rebel. Tribes are usually well versed with martial skills. Since they live in the forests, they mainly rely on hunting, they collect basic forest produce, they have a very harmonious relationship, a sustainable relationship with their environment, with the forests. They respect the forests, they respect their land, they respect the animals, right? They never pollute, they don't over exploit. They take what is needed and in return protect their forests as well. So tribes and ethnic groups, they share that special bond with the forests. That is their identity, that is where they live. Is that clear? This is something which is widely depicted in many popular movies as well. From Avatar to Triple R, right? The theme is exactly the same. If ethnic groups, native indigenous communities face any kind of outside threat to their land, to their resources, their culture, their identity, they will retaliate. Because that is the only way they can protect themselves. Because historically, these communities have not been exposed to modernization, right? They've not been exposed to the modern laws and modern ways of governance. So they feel that any kind of outside interference is a threat to them, and which is genuine to an extent. The first time that the tribes and ethnic groups in Northeast India felt threatened was under British rule. British India, which dominated over Northeast India as well, right? It did lead to the violation of rights, the violation of the cultural identity of the tribal ethnic communities here. But the British were very smart. They realized that they can never occupy these areas entirely for themselves. They realized that they can't, you know, humiliate these communities or target their identity. So what the British did was, instead of occupying these areas entirely, they mainly focused on the resources. They struck deals with various princely states and tribal leaders and ethnic groups. They gave them their autonomy, gave them their independence. They never forcefully brought the areas under British India entirely. They gave them administrative autonomy, gave them independence with regard to governance and administration, but gained access to resources. That's what the British wanted. They didn't care about the people. They didn't care about the land. They wanted the forest resources. They wanted the rich resources of Northeast India to drive Britain's growth. Right? They were purely driven by their economic interests, their colonial interests. So the British, their interference, their laws, their policies, not only led to economic exploitation of the region and the people here, it harmed their culture, it harmed their identity to an extent. So many of these communities, they were waiting to break away from this British control, and they wanted to reassert their identity. They wanted to gain control over their community, their land and resources, and they always had a desire to be independent nations. Many tribes and ethnic groups here, they never wanted to be a part of India. As India's freedom struggle was accelerating, right, when India's independence was about to become an eventual reality, several ethnic groups from here, they raised demands for their independence. They made it clear that culturally they are different. Historically, culturally, many of the regions here, they have no connection with the rest of India. culturally they are distinct, right? And they have their own rights, their own resources, their own issues which needs protection. They didn't expect India to understand them. So they started demanding independence even during colonial times. Many communities had openly raised the demand that they should not be included in India when India is given independence. They had got some promises as well from the British that they'll be given independence. So eventually in 1947, when India was born, right, Indian leaders would never accept the breakaway of any territories. That was not possible for us because then a strong Indian Union could not have been formed. If independence was granted to some tribes and ethnic groups here and some princely states, similar demands would have been made by every other kingdom, by every other community. Such demands existed as well from South India to North India, right? If these demands were being met, then there would be no India. The concept of India would have never been realized, right? India would have never been a strong nation state, a strong union. So either by force or by negotiations, India decided to keep all these territories together to build a strong union. So this led to the merger of all these territories into the Indian Union, which was interpreted by the natives as a forceful merger. Some of the ethnic groups and tribal communities, they saw the merger with India as a betrayal by the British. All right? They saw this as a forceful merger and they resisted it. They made it very clear that they wanted independence. This became one of the root causes in some states and with some ethnic communities for the rise for insurgent movements, the rise for separatist movements. All right, this is one of the causes, not for all the groups, but some of the groups. Some of the groups felt they were forcefully merged with India against their will. They felt that India was annexing, occupying their territories. So they resisted the merger and it became one of the causes for resentment, which eventually gave rise to separatist movements. Is that clear? So these 2 points are very, very important. Next. After these regions came under India, several laws and policies of the Indian government seemed to hurt tribal rights. Environmental laws, developmental policies, right? It would lead to displacement of tribal communities. It would lead to an impact on tribal culture and customs. See, in a democratic nation, we try to apply a common law, right? We try to provide for a uniform law as much as possible. But in some tribal communities, their customs are very different. In Northeast India, there are some communities which are matriarchal or matrilineal, where the woman is the head of the household, right? There are very different marriage customs. The customs related to inheritance, adoption, divorce, they're all very different in some communities. And also the faith, the religion that they practice. Some communities have their own native faith. Some have subscribed to Hinduism, some have subscribed to Islam or Christianity. So the religious customs, the faith of the community, the practices, this felt that there was a feeling that this felt threatened by Indian governance, by Indian laws that would be imposed following independence. So the environmental laws, the civil laws, the developmental laws and policies, some of them were rejected by the community here in Northeast India. This also had an impact. It had a role to play. Along with that, there was a sense of neglect of the region with regard to its development. This is a very genuine root cause. As Northeast India was far away from mainland India, especially from Delhi, subsequent governments did not pay enough attention to develop the region. Connectivity was a big challenge. Poor connectivity through Siliguri corridor, was a big challenge. And since violent insurgencies had already broken out by 1947, 1950s itself, India's obsession here became security. In the initial years of independence itself, insurgencies had started. So India's main focus became keeping the region secure, tackling the security threats. So when security becomes the priority of the government, development and welfare becomes compromised. So over the decades, especially from 1950s to 1990s, during those 40 years, adequate attention was not paid for developing the region. Connectivity did not improve. Economic opportunities weren't created, whereas the rest of the country was growing at a faster pace. So this led to a sense of neglect, a sense of alienation. They felt that rest of India didn't care about them. And this is true as well. Across India, there is very poor understanding of what is Northeast India. In other parts of the country, let's say you go to Gujarat, you go to Tamil Nadu, right? People in India have a very poor understanding of Northeast India. And the worst part is that there is racial bias. We Indians, we claim to face racial discrimination in foreign countries, but within our country, we racially discriminate against our own people, right? From calling them Chinese to making stereotypical jokes, right? And to treating them with suspicion. There is every kind of racial bias and discrimination against the Northeast community. And this is a reality in India. Even today, in Indian cities, we have thousands of students and workers from Northeast India. They struggle to get a accommodation. Several landowners or property owners, they don't give their house on rent to people from Northeast India, right? They blame them for being criminals or being involved in criminal activities, being involved in insurgent terrorist activities. Such stereotyping and biases exist, which is openly shown as well. So there is discrimination and even an element of violence also has been seen in some cases where attacks have happened against people of Northeast India in other parts of the country. So this existence of racial bias and discrimination obviously breeds resentment. Even from the government, there is a sense of neglect, a sense of alienation. Today, things are different. In the last 20, 30 years, things have improved. But I'm mainly talking about 1950s to 1990s. The lack of development, the neglect of the region, the lack of economic opportunities also became a driving factor along with the disconnect with rest of India. There was a cultural disconnect. Understood? So this became another major driving factor that aided the various insurgent movements in the Northeast region. Next, the external support. Many insurgent groups, they've easily got support from hostile countries. They have found a safe haven to hide, to operate freely from here, and then infiltrate into India, to cross the border, come across into India, then carry out attacks and go back and hide in the sanctuaries present in the neighboring countries. Bangladesh and East Pakistan. In East Pakistan, when it was under Pakistani rule, for some insurgents from Northeast India were sheltered and supported by the Pakistani state as part of its covert war against India. Even in Bangladesh, there were few hostile governments. There was a military rule and the government of BNP, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which were pro-Pakistan and anti-India. These hostile Bangladeshi governments as well, especially from 1970s to 1990s, they openly sheltered multiple Northeast insurgent groups and gave them a safe haven in the country. They allowed them to set up their camps. They allowed them to cross over the border. And they even enabled them to procure drugs, arms, and funds through which they could launch the war against India. The same has happened in Myanmar. Not by the government or the army, but there are ethnic groups in Myanmar which are connected to ethnic groups in Northeast India. there exists a familial connection, a direct cultural familial bond exists between some of the ethnic groups which are in India and which are in Myanmar. For example, Nagas. Nagas can be found in India as well, in Myanmar as well. The Kukis of Manipur, they are connected to the Chin and the Zo or Zomi community in Myanmar. The Mizos of Mizoram are connected to the Chin community in Myanmar. And across the border, they have got support from these native ethnic groups when they started their insurgencies. Understood? Even in Myanmar, some of these ethnic groups are carrying out insurgency against Myanmar's army, against the Janta rule. The Chin community, for example, the Chins have been leading their own insurgent war against Myanmar's military rule. So these communities are connected to each other and they have supported each other. Is that clear? And along with that, our hostile neighbors like China, they have used Myanmar to support these groups and wage a covert proxy war against India. Is that clear? China is involved in this conflict. Chinese intelligence agencies, especially after the 1962 war, from 1960s to early 2000, and even now, India has reasons to believe that Chinese intelligence provides support to some Northeast rebels through Myanmar. It has provided funds, weapons, and given the state support for these acts of terrorism against India. So China has used Myanmar's territory for this purpose. Similarly, Pakistan has created a support base in Bangladesh. It has tried doing the same in Myanmar as well. Pakistan's ISI has tried to sponsor some Northeast groups and it has successfully done it, especially via Bangladesh. When hostile Bangladeshi governments were there, which were pro-Pakistan, they allowed the ISI to work with these groups and provide them funds and arms and other support through which they could wage their war against India. So the presence of safe haven in Bangladesh and Myanmar and hostile countries like Pakistan and China supporting them through their intelligence agencies has been a major factor in driving insurgency against India. All right. Next, one more important reason. This region that you see here along the Myanmar border, this is a very delicate border. The length of the border is around 1,640 kilometers, approximately around that. And this border is highly porous because the terrain is very complex here. It's a very complicated terrain. If you look at the border areas in Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur, and Mizoram, you have hilly mountains, dense forests, very remote areas which are not even connected with the rest of the country. So the terrain here is very complex, connectivity is challenging. So it becomes easier for the insurgents to cross over the border. Right? They can easily infiltrate across into Myanmar because of the complicated geography. It's not easy to secure this border. Border security, border management becomes challenging along the Myanmar border because of the tough geography and terrain. And along with that, Myanmar is part of the Golden Triangle. It's part of this region called Golden Triangle, which includes Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand. And the Golden Triangle is a hub of organized crime. All types of organized criminal activities are present here, which aids the terror groups and insurgent groups that operate in the region. Is that clear? In this Golden Triangle of Southeast Asia, drug trafficking, drug production is very high. Arms trafficking is very high. Even human trafficking and wildlife trafficking is present, along with cyber crimes. There are many criminal cartels that operate from here engaging in cyber crimes. committing cyber frauds. They are involved in money laundering, right? So the presence of all these criminal activities, the easy availability of drugs, easy availability of arms and weapons, and the presence of all the smuggling trafficking networks makes it easier for the insurgents to raise funds for their operations, to procure weapons and drugs for their operations. As we discussed under previous chapters, insurgents and terrorists, they're known to use drugs to indoctrinate the youth because it's easier for them to radicalize them. If the youth are addicted to drugs, it becomes easier for these radical elements to brainwash them and radicalize them. They also smuggle drugs for a commission through which they raise funds. They get involved in drug production and drug trafficking to raise revenue for their operations. They make use of money laundering channels to finance the acts of terrorism. They easily get hold of weapons. They get involved in criminal activities like extortion. They threaten people and extort money from them. They will get involved in human trafficking, wildlife trafficking to raise funds. So that terror financing is very easy over here. It's easy to get access to arms and weapons as well. So this is another major factor. Apart from the safe haven being present with state support, there is easy availability of drugs, arms, and other support needed due to the nexus between organized criminal cartels and insurgent and terrorist organizations. Is that clear? Then if you look at the border with Bangladesh, this is the longest land boundary of India, around 4,096 kilometers in length. This is our longest land boundary. And even this is a complex border. It's a highly porous border due to the difficult geography. There are mountainous forested areas. Multiple rivers are cutting across India-Bangladesh border. There are some densely populated areas right near the border. So border security becomes a very big challenge even with the Bangladeshi border. From Bangladesh, we have received a huge influx of refugees and especially illegal migrants, which is seen as a threat by the native indigenous communities. Remember, I told you, native indigenous communities and tribal ethnic groups, they resist any outside interference. They feel that outsiders will harm their identity, their culture, their land and resources. But in Bangladesh, the crisis that has prevailed in Bangladesh has led to a huge influx of refugees and illegal migrants into India, especially into the Northeast, which has been opposed by the native indigenous communities in Northeast. This also has been a contributing factor to the rise of insurgencies in the region. All right. And one last point. India's counter-insurgency operations under controversial laws such as AFSPA has allegedly led to human rights violations. Large-scale human rights violations have been alleged in the region, which also breeds resentment against the Indian forces and the Indian government. In Manipur, in Nagaland, Mizoram, even in Tripura and Assam, wherever AFSPA was imposed, there are very serious allegations of fake killings, fake encounters, rapes and molestations, kidnappings and torture against Indian forces, against Assam Rifles and even against the Indian Army. Right? Even if some of the allegations are false, there is prima facie evidence available to show that some rogue officers have committed such grave violations. In a conflict zone, as you know, if your state forces are committing these violations, even if there are few cases which are happening, and if the people are not getting justice for that, it will breed resentment against the state. It will promote hatred and anger against the state, creating a factor for driving radicalization. So all these factors are responsible. These are some common factors that I can suggest which have contributed to so many insurgencies in Northeast India. So from the geography of the place to demography of the place, the presence of hostile neighbors and hostile countries, the presence of organized crime, right? The complex social structures, the complex economic factors, and other security strategic factors. They've all played a role in driving insurgency in Northeast India. Is that clear? So I want all of you to make a note of this, because you can expect a question, a 15-mark question asking you to explain why the Northeast region has been so vulnerable to insurgencies. So I've given all the points as well in the next few slides. You can take a look later. Whatever I discussed right now, the same points, more or less the same points, have been provided in the next few slides. So please make a note. Understand how Siliguri corridor has been a choke point as far as connectivity is concerned between Northeast region and rest of India. Correct? Connectivity has been hampered because of Siliguri corridor being a choke point. To those who don't know, where is Siliguri corridor? This small land corridor of India over here, right over here, between Nepal and Bangladesh. It's a very narrow corridor. At the lowest point, at the narrowest point, it's hardly 22 to 30 kilometers in width. It goes up to around 60 kilometers in width. Such a narrow piece of land is the only link between Northeast India and rest of India. So from here, connectivity is a challenge. Beyond Siliguri, you enter Darjeeling and the Brahmaputra Valley region. So the geography is very complex. You have hilly mountainous areas, river valleys, dense forests. So creating infrastructure from here and building access is very difficult and challenging. So today we are trying alternate routes. Today we are working with Bangladesh and even Myanmar to create alternate routes to connect with Northeast India, to bring development and better connectivity. But back in those days, connectivity was hampered because of the choke point being present at Siliguri, and also the neglect from the government, the lack of development in the region directly played a role in driving extremism. Again, you can see the linkages between lack of development and rise in extremism, which was our very first chapter, right? So whatever we discussed, all those points are over here. Please take a look and go through them and use the map, the points I've written, so that you can prepare for this possible question. All these points, they're all the same. Whatever we covered, they've all been listed in those slides. Now, what is the order in which insurgencies broke out in Northeast India? What's the chronological order? These insurgencies, they did not start at the same time. In different states, they started at different times. Even within states, there were multiple insurgencies which started at different points in time. The first insurgency in the Northeast is the Naga insurgency. Could be a prelims question as well. The first insurgency in independent India, not just in Northeast India, is the Naga insurgency. It started in 1947 itself. Even before India became independent, right before India's independence, Nagas had already declared their insurgent war against the Indian state. All right. Back then, there was no Nagaland. It was part of Assam itself, because Assam was a very large state. Is that clear? It included Meghalaya, it included Mizoram, it included Nagaland as well. It was a very big state back then. The Naga insurgency was the first insurgency to break out right before our independence, and it continues to thrive even today. In 2023, 75 years later, Naga insurgency is still active. So this will be our focus, the first chapter that we are going to study under Northeast insurgency. Then, in 1960s, insurgencies broke out in Mizoram and Manipur. We are going to study this in detail as well. Today, Mizoram has become peaceful largely. The Mizo insurgency has come to an end. But there are some threats in Mizoram, security threats. Manipur, as you know, had witnessed a violent insurgency back in 60s, going all the way till 1990s. But in the last 20-25 years, things had stabilized. But the last few months have been disastrous for Manipur. Many unfortunate events have happened because of armed militant groups on both the sides. the Meiteis, the Kukis, and also the failure of the government, the state and the central governments, has directly contributed to large-scale ethnic violence, which is directly connected with insurgency in Manipur. So this is something we'll be studying in detail. And then 1970s, Assam and Tripura, they both witnessed multiple insurgent movements thriving from 70s onwards. Is that clear? So these are the major topics we are going to cover. Now you might ask, what about Meghalaya? We will not cover Meghalaya as the topic is not very important for the exam, from the examination point of view. Meghalaya has seen insurgencies in the Garo, Kasi, Jaintia Hill region, and even some other ethnic groups in Meghalaya also have taken up insurgency, but more or less they have all been tackled today. They're not a major threat as such. Also, insurgency in Meghalaya has not lasted for a very long time. It has never posed such a big threat to India compared to the others. So from an examination point of view, trust me, it's not a very important topic. So we can skip this. You don't have to worry about it. Arunachal Pradesh. Arunachal Pradesh has no insurgency of its own. There is no native local insurgency in Arunachal Pradesh because the factors needed for insurgency have never come up. But however, other insurgents from other states, they have used Arunachal Pradesh to hide, to operate. Like Naga insurgents, Mizo insurgents, the Assamese and Tripuri insurgents. They have used Arunachal Pradesh for transit, for a safe haven, for crossing into Myanmar and China, right? To get support from across the border. Arunachal Pradesh has been used by other insurgents. But Arunachal Pradesh itself has no local insurgency of its own. So the focus of our discussion will be Naga insurgency, the insurgencies in Assam. Assam has multiple insurgencies. We'll cover all of them. Then Manipur, Mizoram, and Tripura. This will be the focus of our discussion. So I have listed the common factors here. I've given you a summary of the general factors. Please take a note, and if there is a question on this, you can directly add these points, draw a rough map if possible, and explain all these points that we have covered. Got it? So you can already prepare for this topic. You need not wait for a question to be asked. Make an answer, keep an answer ready for this. Any question on Northeast India or Northeast insurgency, you can add some of these points. This gives you that conceptual clarity as well regarding why so many insurgencies persist in Northeast India. Now let me show you the important insurgent groups which we are going to focus upon. The major insurgent outfits of Northeast India. NSCN, ULFA, UNLF, PLA, and a few others. These will be the focus of our discussion. Is that clear? There are a few others as well, like All Tripura Tiger Force. Then you also have Kamtapur Liberation Organization. You have various Bodo outfits like NDFB. We also have MNF, Mizo National Front. So those are the other insurgent groups which we'll be covering and discussing. But the most important ones are NSCN, ULFA, UNLF, and PLA. These are the major insurgent organizations that we have seen in Northeast India. Out of the 30-40 odd insurgencies, these are the ones which have posed the biggest threat to India because they have been the most dominant. They have been the biggest groups in the region and they have sustained their armed movement for many years. And they have been extremely violent. They have used extreme violence. They have carried out several major attacks threatening our integrity and sovereignty. They have enjoyed tremendous cross-border support in Bangladesh and in Myanmar. This cross-border support has enabled them to survive and thrive for so many decades. And as a result, any conflict resolution with these outfits will have the biggest impact for stabilizing the Northeast region. Recently, we have ended Bodo insurgency with a Bodo peace accord. Mizo insurgency was brought to an end many years ago through a peace process with the Mizo National Front. Currently, we are negotiating with Naga insurgents. Naga peace process is going on. So we are going to discuss all these insurgent movements state by state. We'll examine the root causes. We'll understand what has motivated them, what threats have they posed to India, what support have they enjoyed across the border, and how has India tackled these insurgent outfits. Right? All these points are very important along with the current status in Northeast India. So I think we can stop the discussion here. I can look at some questions and doubts, and we can meet in the next class where we will take up the state-wise discussion. We will be starting with Nagaland. We'll talk about Naga insurgency. Then we'll focus on Assam and various insurgent movements here in Assam. And then the smaller states, Manipur, Mizoram, and Tripura. So this will complete our discussion. So hopefully we can take it up tomorrow. We can try to cover this chapter as well. Now, if you have any questions, any doubts, let me know. I'm here for a few more minutes. I'll try to answer all the questions, as many as possible. Gayatri is asking, sir, previous slide, please. Okay. Here's the previous slide if you're writing down. And then again, don't worry, you'll get the annotated PPT as well. You can jot down the points later also. Okay, let's see the questions which are coming up. Priyanshu is asking, Mizo National Front is a political party. How it became a Northeast insurgent group? You're absolutely right, Priyanshu. Today it is a political party. It has formed the government in Mizoram. But previously it was an insurgent outfit. We will study that, don't worry. This insurgent group called MNF, which was designated as a terrorist organization, later became a political party because of the peace process. We ended the insurgency through a peace process and allowed MNF to enter mainstream politics. It has contested elections, won elections, and formed the state government as well. So we will study that under Mizoram. Chituri is asking, why can't India build a border wall along Myanmar border like China's wall? See, building a wall along the border or fencing it is not an easy task, right? It will take very big investments, and also the geography, which is very complex, will not help you in any such construction, right? We have created a fence along the Pakistan border. India-Pakistan border is largely fenced. Even with Bangladesh, some parts of the Bangladeshi border is also fenced, but you can't do it everywhere. 1,640 kilometers, right? That's the border length with Myanmar. So you can't just go on building border walls and fences everywhere. And also creating such barriers will harm your relations as well. It will undermine your economic and cultural and people to people relations with the neighboring country. Next, Vaishna is asking, has the implementation of Schedule 6 helped in effectively giving autonomy and curbing secessionist tendencies in Northeast? The Schedule 6, that is 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution, it provides special provisions for the tribal areas in few states of Northeast India. We will be discussing that. The topic will come up for discussion in Assam, in Meghalaya, right, and in Mizoram and Tripura. In these 4 states, the 6th schedule provisions applies for the tribal areas where constitutional autonomy is given. So we will be discussing how the autonomy has worked, how it has helped in providing better development, in protecting the rights of tribals, and how it has played a role in tackling insurgency. We'll also discuss some of the challenges in implementation of 6th schedule provisions. All right. While discussing Naxalism, we mentioned 5th schedule. Similarly, here we'll talk about the 6th schedule. Abhijit is asking, does Gaza Strip have a government? Hamas itself is the authority in Gaza. You can't call it a government because no one recognizes Hamas as a government of Palestine or Gaza Strip. But it did win elections in 2007. It defeated Fatah, which is the other political party, and Hamas, that's how it rose to power. It has become the governing authority of Gaza. So Gaza's administration has been under the control of Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. Atmakuri is asking, sir, you have told to explain Mumbai attacks. Please explain. See, the details of the attack is not needed for the exam. Like how the attack happened, like what were the events. That is not going to be asked in exam. Don't waste your time on that. Just understanding the impact, what changes happened in India after that, right? What were the failures on our side? That is more important from an examination point of view. You don't have to know the sequence of events of every terror attack, not necessary for the exam. Sakshi is asking, what can we do if we find terrorists in other countries? If no surgical strike, no action by mother country, then what can countries like India do? See, there are many measures you can take to counter terrorism, even if terrorists are hiding in other countries. For example, one, try to bring international pressure on the country which is hosting them. If the other country is not acting against them, if they're not helping us to bring down these terrorists, try to bring international pressure on them. Use platforms like UN, right? Try to designate those individuals as global terrorists so they're forced to act. Next, step up your intelligence operations. If required, covert operations will have to be conducted, either to apprehend them or to curb their activities, or sometimes, in worst case scenarios, to even assassinate them. Right? So there are many other options available like these. Of course, you have to build your bilateral ties with the country as well. Bilaterally, you can work with them to see whether if they're ready to cooperate with India. Of India, such as engineers, doctors, have been diverted by some terror organizations. Can we say that they may be diverted due to lack of skills and jobs? See, this is not just about skills and jobs. It's not even about education. Any person who is vulnerable for, indoctrination, they would have some kind of resentment against the state. This could be genuine in some cases. It could be built on false propaganda as well in some cases. Like take Naxalism, for example, or Khalistan movement, for example, or even ISIS, Indian Mujahideen, for example. The terrorists come from different backgrounds, right? Some of them are very poor members from tribal communities. Some are decently educated, right? Some are well educated with very good jobs as well, and yet they fall for terrorism. So education alone will not guarantee that the youth will be protected from indoctrination and radicalization. It's about their circumstances, the environment they have grown up in. Let's say someone from a conflict zone who has faced the impact of uh, security forces and their actions, they might hold a grudge against the force, against the state itself, right? Or someone who has suffered directly because of communal riots, lack of development, they might be holding some resentment against the state, which could be genuine. Or in some cases, they might be misled. They might be being misled by false propaganda, by lies, fake news. So it's a combination of all these factors, along with the religious factor. Religious indoctrination is very powerful. It can corrupt minds. Young minds can be easily corrupted, whether they are educated, whether they are having skills, whether they are illiterate, doesn't matter. Religious indoctrination has that power on human mind, right? So there are many factors which contributes to it. It's a very complex list of factors. But yeah, generally this is how it works. It's not just because they don't have skills. They do have skills. If someone has studied well, if he's an engineer or a doctor, and then joining a terror group, doesn't mean they have no skills or no jobs. If they want, they can find a job. Problem is, they might have faced some kind of injustice which they feel is wrong according to them, right? Which has caused them to hold hatred against the state, or they've been easily brainwashed by radical ideology. They've been led by false propaganda and fake news. So that's what would happen with these young minds. Class will end at 9. No, we'll end the class right now at 8:30 itself. Rashida is asking, sir, Chandrayaan 3 technology will be useful for terrorism to be overcome in the future. How? No, that will not help. Chandrayaan 3 is for lunar exploration. That will not help in countering terrorism. But other satellite technologies, like satellites used for surveillance, that could help in improving border security, in checking infiltration, the Earth observing satellites. Chandrayaan 3 will not help in countering terrorism. All right. So, guys, these were some of the questions. I've tried picking as many as possible. So, let's close the session for today. We'll meet again tomorrow and we'll try to finish the chapter on Northeast insurgency. All right. So, I hope it was another good session. Do let me know how it went. I hope you guys liked it. So, let's see you tomorrow again. Till then, take care. Have a good night.